A village was wiped out in the battle against the demon lord. A little boy named Lloyd is standing in front of the ruins, and the haunted look in his eyes reveals the deep trauma he's endured. When a woman discovers him standing amidst the ruins, she's overwhelmed with guilt, knowing that her own negligence caused the devastation. Wanting to make amends, she brings Lloyd into her home and offers him a new life. While he stays with her, she also begins teaching him the art of magic. Her first lesson for Lloyd is the flame spell. She briefly demonstrates the spell, then tells Lloyd that if he can't figure out how to cast it by himself, he won't be getting any dinner that day. Miraculously, by nightfall, Lloyd succeeds in producing a tiny flame. Yet, when he presents it to his master, instead of praising him, she extinguishes it with a breath, and then snaps her fingers to engulf him in a wall of fire, scolding him for not doing it properly. Still, she allows him to eat dinner since he did manage to learn the spell. The next day, his master changes things up and tells Lloyd that he'll be learning water magic. She gives a brief demonstration. She sweeps her foot along the ground to create a small spout of water. When it's Lloyd's turn to try, he manages to slightly dampen the ground and looks quite pleased with himself. But his master isn't impressed at all. To show him what real water magic looks like, she dumps a massive amount of water on him. As time passes, Lloyd's training carries on, with him putting in his best effort to learn new spells while Merlin dishes out harsh punishments whenever he falls short. But surprisingly, her tough methods actually pay off. When winter arrives, Lloyd's magic has improved so much that he can summon a snow sculpture of Merlin with little effort. It was a kind gesture, and although she appreciates it, she refuses to show it. Instead, she takes over the snow sculpture, uses it to grab Lloyd, and dramatically enlarges it to demonstrate true mastery over ice magic. The sculpture eventually collapses, causing Lloyd to fall. Still, by now, the two share a strong mutual understanding. As soon as he pulls himself out of the snow, Lloyd tells Merlin he'll put more effort into his magic, and she responds with a smile of approval. Some time passes, and one morning Merlin is sprawled out on her couch, nursing a hangover from drinking too much wine the night before. Lloyd comes by to check on her and asks if she's okay, but she groans and tells him she feels absolutely awful. Wanting to help, Lloyd places his hand on her forehead and uses his healing magic to ease her hangover. Within seconds, Merlin feels significantly better. She sits up, gives Lloyd a hug, and thanks him for the healing. Now that she's feeling like herself again, she declares it's time to resume his magic training, then promptly drags him back outside. This continues for several months. Then, one day, Merlin gets a book that deeply worries her. At that moment, Lloyd knocks on her door to call her for dinner. She replies that she'll be right there and begins to put the book aside. But as she does, she accidentally drops it in front of Lloyd. He stoops to pick it up, and the moment his hands touch it, a rush of knowledge instantly fills his mind. Lloyd collapses from the overwhelming flood of information. When Merlin realizes what's happened, she's stunned. He possesses the traits of the Chosen One. For now, she carries him to bed. But if he truly is the prophesied one, she can't allow him to repeat her past mistakes. With a gentle kiss on his forehead, a soft glow lingers as she casts a spell on him. She refuses to let Lloyd grow arrogant with his power, just as she once did. The following day, Lloyd's training carries on, and this time, his master brings him into the forest to practice his white magic. He focuses his power on a single fruit, making it ripen and become juicy. Impressed, his master compliments him on his progress. However, she also wants to remind him there's still much more to learn. Placing her hand on the tree, she casts white magic and causes the whole tree to flourish with vibrant greenery. That night, Merlin assists Lloyd with his studies and tells him that some orcs possess rare magic capable of controlling monsters. As they read, Lloyd comes across a mention of ancient magic, but the moment he brings it up, Merlin's expression changes, and she firmly tells him that he doesn't need to learn anything about ancient magic. One of her training drills involves summoning a magic staff in an instant. When Lloyd fails to react swiftly enough, Merlin strikes him down with her own staff. She sternly warns him that he must never grow complacent in his practice, no matter how strong he gets. Lloyd vows to stay committed and never slack in his training. For their next lesson, Merlin teaches Lloyd about magic stones. She explains that these stones are solidified concentrations of mana, so potent that they can transform nearby objects into magic stones too. A few months pass, and during one of Merlin's lessons, she brings Lloyd deep into the wilderness, hands him a knife, and tells him he has to survive in the forest and find his way back home alone within 1 week. Before he can protest, she takes off running, leaving him stranded. Not long after she disappears, a huge wolf emerges from the trees and launches an attack on Lloyd. Lloyd flees for his life and ends up climbing a tree to escape the wolf. He doubts that a white mage like him has the power to take down such a beast, so his best bet is to make it back home without running into any more monsters. However, when he uses magic to scan his surroundings and figure out the right path, he realizes just how far he's wandered. With no other option, he begins carefully making his way through the forest, and once night falls, he uses the time to study his spells, trying to improve them as much as he can. Days pass with their usual routine until one moment, Lloyd snaps a branch underfoot, alerting a massive spider to his location. Heart-pounding, he bolts in the opposite direction, casting a haste spell to surge ahead of the creature. After a long and exhausting journey, he finally reaches home safely, only to collapse from fatigue right outside the door. When Merlin finds him, she's genuinely proud of him for making it back alone, proving his resilience. Several more years pass, and one day while Lloyd is cleaning, he spots a book on Merlin's desk about a town. Curious, he asks if he can borrow it, and she tells him to keep it. By now, Lloyd has essentially finished his training, so he's no longer subjected to her non-stop lessons. However, every other day she still ropes him into helping her create new spells, since his knack for magic development is exceptional. Lloyd doesn't mind though. He's happy she finally sees him as an equal. However, he hasn't slept at all in the past few days, as Merlin forces him to stay awake every night for magical experiments. The relentless demands are wearing on him, and his fascination with town life only grows. Eventually, he decides to take bold action. The following morning, Merlin goes up to Lloyd's room to request his assistance with more magical studies. However, she's shocked to find him missing. Based on the book left open on his desk, she can guess exactly where he is. Meanwhile, Lloyd reaches the town and is instantly impressed by the bustling activity around him, this being his first time in such a place. After buying a simple loaf of bread, he realizes he's completely broke and needs work fast. Just then, a poster advertising for adventurers flies right into his face. Without hesitation, Lloyd decides to apply. The whole time, a cloaked man has been secretly tailing Lloyd, clearly interested in the decision he just made. After Lloyd officially joins the adventurers party, he and his new teammates head to the castle to battle a huge cyclops. When the fight gets tough, the party leader, Alan, tells the healer, Sheena, to restore his health. But just as she's about to act, Lloyd silently casts his advanced stat buff spell, instantly making everyone feel stronger and revitalized. None of them realize it was Lloyd's doing. He never says a word. After the buff takes effect, the archer lands a shot right in the Cyclops' eye, and then Rena uses her shield to block one of its punches, surprised by how effortlessly she managed it. Alan, on the other hand, doesn't question his sudden increase of power and confidently finishes off the Cyclops, fully convinced it was all thanks to his own power. But Rena appears to have picked up on the fact that Lloyd had something to do with their unexpected boost. With the Cyclops defeated, the party returns to town, where Alan is celebrated as a hero. Apparently, the creature was so formidable that no one else had managed to take it down. The reward for the feat turns out to be enormous, but Alan hands Lloyd a mere 5 gold coins, claiming the low amount is due to him being just a rookie D-rank adventurer. Lloyd takes the money without protest, but when Alan suggests a toast to the party's victory, Lloyd excuses himself because he doesn't want to be involved. The party's mage, Maya, gets offended that Lloyd doesn't want to drink with them, but Alan tells her it's fine since they can always hire another white mage, and it's not like he contributed much to the party's performance anyway. Back at Merlin's home, the mysterious man from earlier appears, and Merlin questions him about Lloyd's whereabouts. The man informs her that Lloyd made it to town and has already joined a famous party. Relieved to hear he's safe, Merlin reflects that it was time for him to explore the world independently, as long as he doesn't grow overconfident like she once did in her youth. She believes he'll be just fine. The man asks if she still carries any regrets about that day. Merlin's expression twists with bitterness as she recalls her mistake. At the time, she hadn't foreseen the Demon Lord's willingness to self-destruct just to obtain the grimoire. That single miscalculation led to the destruction of an entire village, instantly wiping out everyone nearby, including Merlin herself. Luckily, her companion Sybil managed to bring everyone back using forbidden ancient magic, but the cost was his own life. Since then, Merlin has never stopped blaming herself. Back in Lloyd's ongoing adventures with the hero party, he continues to quietly support them. Whenever Alan or the others run into trouble during a fight, Lloyd is always there, casting buffs to give them an edge. Thanks to his efforts, the team maintains an almost flawless win streak, with everyone consistently performing at their best. Yet none of them realize just how much of the load Lloyd is actually carrying. That night, Rena is studying defensive techniques when Alan barges into her room, curious about what she's doing. She explains that she's a bit confused because monster attacks haven't been hitting her shield as hard as before. Alan agrees, saying he's been feeling the same thing but just assumed it was his natural skill kicking in. Rena points out that he hasn't been training much lately, so his sudden strength boost doesn't make sense. Meanwhile, deep in the forest that night, a group of guards were wrapping up their patrol when, without warning, one of them let out a cry of agony. The others turned just in time to see a huge earth golem looming above him. In that instant, one of the guards knew this was the end for him. The following morning, the guard captain approaches Alan to request his assistance. He explains that the guards who were on patrol last night were savagely killed. Without hesitation, Alan agrees to help, assuming that taking down a golem should be a simple task. Later that afternoon, they follow Lloyd's tracking magic to trace the earth golem to a cave hidden behind a waterfall. With Lloyd still providing magical support, they make quick work of the stone monster. However, a demon summons another golem from the falling rocks above, forcing them back into battle. Lloyd examines the demon more closely and notices that it's using a staff embedded with a magic stone to control the golem. Knowing how dangerous magic stones can be, he realizes he has to act fast before things spiral out of control. He casts a precision spell and tells Lulu to shoot an arrow at the demon. Caught off guard by Lloyd's sudden command, Lulu hesitates for a moment but follows through. Miraculously, her arrow manages to pierce through and hit the target. Lloyd then instructs Mia to teleport the staff to him. As soon as it's in his hands, he quickly casts a spell to seal its magic. Meanwhile, Alan is growing irritated that Lloyd keeps giving commands, even though he's supposed to be the one in charge. Frustrated, Alan tries to reclaim authority by rushing in to land the killing strike on the golem himself. Lloyd refuses to let Alan die, so he enhances his own speed with magic and shoves Alan aside just before the golem crushes him. But instead of gratitude, Alan snaps at Lloyd for interfering, ignoring the fact that he was just saved. He then goes on to deliver the final blow to the golem. Once they all return to town, Alan, still pissed off, decides to fire Lloyd for being a nuisance. Alan also accuses him of being lazy and never contributing to the team. And after years of hearing from Merlin that his abilities were useless, Lloyd instinctively assumes the problem must be him. He accepts being kicked out of the party without arguing, and over the next 3 days, he searches for a new party to join. Unfortunately, it proves to be tough. Most parties already have a white mage. However, by chance, a girl at the reception desk is desperately asking the guild receptionist for a white mage. Right then, the receptionist points toward Lloyd, and the moment the girl spots him, she rushes over, grabs his hand, and forces him to join her party. Yui pulls Lloyd along to introduce him to her party, and they're caught off guard by how quickly she returned. They figure she must have come back empty-handed, assuming it'd be nearly impossible to find a new white mage so quickly. But then Yui surprises them by pointing at Lloyd and announcing that he'll be joining the team. But the thing is that she never actually explained any of this to Lloyd, so he never agreed to join in the first place. The others suspected it was too good to be true. They tell Yui they should just abandon the quest they were planning to take since they can't complete it without a white mage. Plus, there's no telling if Lloyd is even capable of filling Clum's role. Everyone agrees that going through with the quest in their current state would be too dangerous. Still, Yui doesn't want to back out because their client is depending on them, and she truly wants to help. Lloyd isn't fully aware of the situation, but he understands the quest is crucial. He suggests letting another party take it instead. However, they explain that no one else is free to handle it. It's an A rank quest, meaning only a rank or higher parties can accept it. Unfortunately, all the rank parties in the capital are already occupied with other missions, leaving no one available. Yui's party is S rank, so they technically qualify for the mission. However, without their usual white mage, they'd need a replacement. The problem is, guild regulations only permit parties to work with officially registered members, meaning they can't just temporarily recruit a white mage from another group. And with such little time, finding a skilled white mage is nearly impossible. Lloyd really wants to support them, but he honestly believes he's not powerful enough to contribute to an S-rank party. Before he can voice his doubts, Yui confidently insists that everything will work out as long as Lloyd is with them. They then bring him out to a field to evaluate his skills before officially adding him to their group. Despite the fact that Lloyd never actually agreed to participate in any of this, they take him out to a field, where Yui asks Lloyd to show them what he can do. However, he's concerned that his abilities will fall short of their expectations, especially since they're S rank like his master. Daggers steps in and tells Yui it's unfair to suddenly pressure Lloyd into demonstrating his power. If she's going to test him, the least she can do is be clear about which spell she wants him to use. Daggers makes a fair argument. Yui then turns to Lloyd and instructs him to cast enhancement magic on the entire group. Lloyd is surprised. The task seems too simple for an S-rank party's trial. To clarify, he asks Yui if she just wants him to buff everyone here. Yui confirms, but with one major condition: he must cast the spell on all of them simultaneously. Lloyd is even more puzzled because he's frequently used enhancement magic on multiple people without any trouble. For him, it's hardly a challenge. So why would this be considered a test? Initially, he suspects there might be some unspoken condition, but they simply want him to cast enhancement magic on them. In fact, they seem to doubt whether he can even manage such a simple task. They ask Lloyd if he's able to do it, and he says yes, though he's still confused about why the test seems so simple. He summons his staff and begins casting the enhancement spell, but Yui is more shocked by the fact that he summoned a staff out of thin air. She immediately asks him where it came from, and Lloyd casually explains that it was just a basic storage spell, so it's nothing special. What really matters to him is Yui's reaction to the enhancement magic he used on her. At first, she hadn't even noticed, but now that she reflects on it, she senses a slight boost in her strength. The others feel the effects too, though there's something unusual about it, different from ordinary enhancement magic. To test the effects, Yui draws her sword and casually swings at a tree. To her shock, the blade slices clean through the trunk with a single strike. She stares in disbelief, but Lloyd thinks the result is only natural given his enhancements. Yui and the others had assumed he would only use strength enhancements, but Lloyd felt that was too basic, so he went ahead and cast additional buffs for physical enhancement, defense, speed, and vitality. The others are completely floored by what he's capable of, frozen in place as they stare at him in shock. Lloyd mistakes their stunned silence for dissatisfaction, thinking he must have failed the test. He apologizes for taking up their time. Clearly, they wouldn't want a white mage like him in their group. Just as he turns to leave, Yui stops him. She can't possibly let someone with his skills walk away, and besides, she's curious to know more about him. She starts asking him a few questions and eventually learns that Lloyd used to be part of the hero party. Yui is surprised, seeing it as a big deal since the hero party is famous across the kingdom. However, Lloyd explains that he was let go because they thought he lacked strength, so he doesn't believe he was of much value to them. Daggers and the rest tell Lloyd it's unbelievable because they've never witnessed anyone use so many different enhancement spells at the same time. However, Lloyd insists that there are definitely people out there more powerful than him. He even suggests to Yui and the others that they should probably just bring back their previous white mage instead. But that isn't really a choice for Yui's party, since their white mage, Clum, has a younger sister who's seriously ill. Until not long ago, Clum was juggling both adventuring and caring for her sister every day, which took a heavy toll on her. It got to the point where she couldn't concentrate during battles anymore, and that's ultimately why she decided to leave the party. Everyone is aware that Clum stepped down solely to avoid becoming a burden to the group. Though they're reluctant to let her leave, they understand and honor her choice. This is why they've been searching for another white mage to fill her role. Usually, they take quests without a white mage, but our rank missions are especially tough without a proper healer. Lloyd can sense how much the group cares for Clum, and he wants to help if possible, so he asks what illness Clum's sister has. Yui isn't entirely sure, but she knows it's a condition that's slowly slowly transforming her sister's body into Magistone. Lloyd recalls reading that Magistone can spread its transformation to other objects, and he's been researching ways to reverse the effect. Believing he might have a solution, he asks Yui to take him to Clum's house. Before long, they arrive. Clum is startled to find Yui and an unfamiliar face at her door, but she invites them inside to talk. Lloyd hesitates before asking, knowing his next question might come across as insensitive, but he needs to understand exactly how Clum's sister fell ill. Clum doesn't take offense and willingly shares the story. She explains that she and her sister Sylvie were longtime adventuring partners. Everything changed during one fateful mission when Sylvie was wounded and slipped into a coma, remaining unconscious ever since. Yui asks whether a monster attacked Sylvie, but Clum admits she doesn't actually know. When she found her sister, Sylvie was already unconscious. When Lloyd presses for details about her symptoms, Clum suggests it would be easier to show him the situation rather than explain it. She leads Yui and Lloyd to the door to Sylvie's bedroom, but she warns them to brace themselves because they may not be ready for what they are about to witness. As soon as Clum opens the door, Lloyd and Yui are hit with a wave of unpleasant mana, and it's all coming from Sylvie. Clum takes the covers off Sylvie's body and reveals that her arms and feet have already begun to transform. It's Lloyd's first time witnessing firsthand what Magistones can do to a person, and he's stunned by how severe it is. For some reason, Still's mana has become unstable, and it's gradually turning her body into Magistone. At this rate, it's only a matter of time before the transformation takes over completely. Lloyd asks Clum to let him take a look at Sylvie since he has something he wants to try, and if his hypothesis is correct, then he might be able to cure her. Clum finds it hard to believe that Lloyd would be able to cure Sylvie when all the best healers in the country could do nothing for her. Lloyd explains that Sylvie's condition is probably due to being pierced by a Magistone of very high purity. He then asks Clum if the cave where Sylvie was injured had a high mana concentration, and Clum confirms it did. In fact, the quest they were on that day involved collecting Magistones from that very cave, so it's likely connected to what happened. Lloyd asks her to show him where Sylvie's wound is, so Clum points at it, and just as Lloyd had expected, a Magistone must have entered Sylvie's body through her wound, and the Magistone's mana is what's transforming her. So far, all of Lloyd's deductions have been correct, so Yui asks Clum to put her faith in him so he can perform the operation to save Sylvie's life. After preparations are complete, Lloyd starts channeling a spell to extract mana directly from Sylvie's body. The process strains him severely as he absorbs wave after wave of corrupted energy. The root of Sylvie's condition traces back to her mana spiraling out of control after exposure to a magic stone. To restore her, Lloyd realizes he must purge nearly all the tainted mana from her system, but he also needs to make sure he doesn't accidentally kill her from mana depletion, so he plans to heal her while simultaneously draining her mana. He begins casting the spells, but Clum doesn't recognize the heal spell Lloyd just used, so she asks him if there's anything different about it. Lloyd explains that he has to do something with all the excess energy he's pulling from Sylvie, so he plans to burn it off by casting a weaker version of the heal spell, since even that basic form drains massive amounts of mana. Since Yui isn't too familiar with white mage terminology, she turns to Clum and asks if what Lloyd's doing is actually something impressive. However, impressive doesn't even begin to describe what Lloyd is doing. He's using a spell he designed on his own. He's casting 2 types of magic alone, which is already impressive, but he also has more willpower than any normal person. As Lloyd continues healing, the magic stone transformation on Sylvie's body begins to regress, and by the time Lloyd is done, she has finally returned to normal. It took a lot out of him to make it happen, so Lloyd is left exhausted after finishing the task. Not long after, Sylvie finally regains consciousness, and Clum is overcome with emotion, crying at the sight of her younger sister awake and well. She thanks both Lloyd and Yui for everything they've done, but once Sylvie is fully recovered, Clum intends to start adventuring alongside her again. Yui is sad that Clum won't be coming back to her party, but she respects Clum's decision to stay with her sister. She walks down the hallway and bids her farewell. As Lloyd prepares to leave, Clum stops him and requests that he look after the party in her place. Lloyd responds that he isn't officially part of the group yet and feels too inexperienced to be of much help. Clum doesn't understand why he doubts himself, but she encourages him to follow his heart instead. That evening, Yui and Lloyd share share the news with the rest of the group that Sylvie has been healed, and everyone commends Lloyd for his incredible effort. Still, since Clum made it clear she won't be coming back, the party now has to reconsider what their next steps will be. In the short time he spent with them, Lloyd has grown fond of everyone and can see that they truly care about one another. Unlike the hero party he used to be part of, a bit nervous, he asks if they'd still be willing to have him as their healer. As it turns out, they were all secretly hoping he'd decide to join them, so his offer is a huge relief and a big win for the party. To welcome Lloyd into their group, Yui tells him he can eat as much as he likes tonight since they'll be paying for everything, something no one has done for him since he arrived in the city. Overjoyed, Lloyd dives in and begins scarfing down plate after plate, amazed by how delicious everything tastes. However, the others are confused by his enthusiasm, as the food is fairly typical by the city's standards. Lloyd is stunned that such rich flavors are considered ordinary here, and it makes him start to doubt the quality of the meals he grew up with. The others become curious and ask what kind of food Lloyd used to eat. He explains that his meals consisted of whatever mushrooms, herbs with some meat from animals he hunted in the forest. Unfortunately, his master cooking skills were terrible. Yui then asks Lloyd to tell them more about his master, because even if her cooking wasn't great, anyone capable of teaching Lloyd such powerful magic must be an incredible person. Silica wonders if Lloyd's master is also a white mage. Lloyd admits he never asked her before leaving home, so he isn't certain. However, judging by how often she created explosions, he suspects she's more of a combat-oriented mage. Silica is amazed that Lloyd's master could teach him white magic despite not specializing in it. She then adds that, if given the chance, she'd love to train under Lloyd's master too. However, Lloyd quickly dismisses the idea, insisting Silica is better off never meeting his master, given the grueling training he endured under Merlin. He wouldn't subject even his greatest foe to that kind of suffering. That doesn't mean he dislikes her, though while she was harsh in her teachings, she also showed him kindness, proving she truly cared for him. Following their celebration, Yui points out that they still need to devise a plan for their mission. However, first, they should fill Lloyd in on the quest details. Yui shows the quest notice, and Daggers explains that their task is to deal with a group of monsters that have been ravaging nearby farms. The locals haven't been able to fend them off alone. Strangely, the pack consists of several different monster species working together, which is highly unusual. Given how unusual the situation is, anything could happen. But Yui feels that as adventurers, it's their duty to protect those in danger, and Lloyd shares her view. As for their strategy, Yui and Daggers won't be much help in a direct fight against a horde of monsters, so they'll need to depend on Silica's magic to take down the creatures. However, using magic across a wide area takes a significant amount of mana, which makes Silica concerned that she might not be able to wipe out the entire group if the horde is too large. Yui then asks Lloyd if he knows any offensive spells. He replies that he does know a few, but he doubts that a white mage like him can match the power of a combat mage like Silica. Regardless, they still need to figure out a battle plan. Daggers proposes that he and Yui take the lead to attract the monsters' attention. Once the creatures are focused on them, he'll lure them into a single location where Silica can unleash a finishing attack. Cross will be responsible for guarding Silica while she prepares her spell, and Lloyd will handle healing and support magic throughout the fight. Silica is thrilled to have Lloyd's support, knowing how powerful his buffs are, yet Lloyd remains puzzled by everyone's high opinion of him. Initially, Yui assumed he was just being humble, but now she sees he truly doesn't grasp his own strength. She encourages him, saying he ought to have more faith in his abilities. Lloyd points out that he was expelled from the heroes' party for being too weak, so he couldn't possibly be as strong as they think. The others still can't understand what kind of fools would dismiss Lloyd as powerless. They have complete faith in his skills. Lloyd is glad to hear that. After wrapping up their strategy meeting, everyone heads outside and agrees to regroup the next morning to start the mission. As they all make their way toward the inn, Daggers notices Lloyd walking in the opposite direction and approaches him to ask where he's headed. Lloyd admits laments that he can't afford a room at the inn. Dagas let his new party member sleep outside, so he offers him a pouch of coins. Lloyd hesitates, not wanting to take money for free, but Dagas tells him it's not a gift, just a temporary favor. He tells Lloyd he can simply repay him once he earns his cut from the mission reward. Lloyd is deeply grateful and promises to do his best to repay the loan. Dagas just urges him to stop wasting time and get to the inn. That night, Lloyd sleeps in a proper bed for the first time in a long while, feeling incredibly thankful to have such kind teammates by his side. The following morning, Lloyd and the group meet outside Yui's house, ready for their mission. When Yui finally steps out to join them, she's surprised to see everyone empty-handed after all. Such missions usually require a lot of gear. The others then explain that Lloyd lent a hand by storing all their supplies with his magic, saving them the trouble of carrying heavy bags. Lloyd offers to store Yui's bag as well, and after he stores her bag, she thanks him, mentioning how much of a hassle it always is to carry luggage while traveling. Lloyd tells them he could teach them how to use storage magic if they're interested, since it's actually not that hard. The others are surprised. They didn't even know regular adventurers like them could learn such a useful skill. Lloyd explains that everyone is born with at least some mana, so learning storage magic should be possible for anyone. It does take a lot of practice to expand how much you can store, but even if their capacity won't match his, it would still be a useful skill to have. Hearing that, they eagerly ask him to teach them, and Lloyd gladly agrees. After a short while, they set off on their journey. As they make their way across the plains, they eventually reach the border of the demon nation. For now, the demons have been keeping quiet, so the area is relatively calm, but there's no telling when they might attempt to invade the continent again. At the same time, deep within the forest, a mysterious figure in a dark cloak conducts a sinister ritual, one that's bound to bring trouble in the near future. Lloyd and the group reach their first checkpoint ahead of schedule, so they decide to make camp by the water. Lloyd retrieves the camping equipment from his storage, and everyone pitches in to set up the tents and prepare a fire pit for the evening. The task takes some time, and once they finish, Yui is exhausted and covered in sweat. She asks Dagas if she can wash up in the river, but Dagas tells her there's still more to do. She needs to collect firewood for cooking dinner. However, Lloyd offers to collect the firewood for Yui instead. Grateful, she thanks him and quickly pulls Silica along to take a bath together in the river. Sometime later, while Lloyd is gathering wood in the forest, he finishes up and gets ready to return to camp until a sudden scream echoes from the river. Yui and Silica had been bathing as planned, but they never expected to encounter a basilisk lurking in the water. To make matters worse, they are both currently unarmed, so if Lloyd doesn't do something soon, then they are going to be eaten. He slides down the cliffside and launches a small fireball to get the monster's attention, and while it is distracted, he tells Yui and Silica to swim over to the shore. He then pulls their weapons out of storage and throws it to them, while simultaneously casting strengthening magic on them. With the battle about to begin, Yui leaps forward and cuts the basilisk's heads in a single slash. Silica quickly shouts for Yui and Lloyd to get clear, warning them that she's about to launch a fireball. They both dive out of the way just as Silica unleashes a powerful blast that completely incinerates the remaining basilisk in one shot. Stunned, Silica stares at the aftermath, amazed by the sheer power of her spell, something she's never managed before. What she doesn't know is that Lloyd had secretly cast a buff spell on her earlier and never mentioned it. Also, at one point, Yui's towel falls off her body right in front of Lloyd and gets embarrassed. Back at camp to take her mind off it, Lloyd decides to start teaching everyone how to use storage magic, and he basically tells them they need to use their hands to open a hole in space so they can store their stuff. It's nowhere near as easy as Lloyd made it sound, but they decide to give it a try anyway. As expected, none of them manage to pull it off, and Lloyd blames himself, thinking he's a poor teacher. However, Dagas reassures him that his instructions were clear, it's just that the others are still new to this, so it'll take time. Right then, Silica has a clever idea. She tries chanting the storage spell aloud. To everyone's surprise, it works. Her storage space opens. That's when the others realize their mistake. They'd been attempting to cast the spell silently, just like Lloyd does, forgetting that they're not on his level yet. They all try doing it with incantations this time, and eventually they are all able to get their storage spaces to work, although they still need a bit of practice. Later that night, after everyone has had dinner, Lloyd is sitting by the fire when Yui comes over to talk to him. She tells tells Lloyd she wants to thank him for joining the party, but Lloyd says there's no need since he was looking for a party to join anyway. Yui still feels a little guilty, knowing she pushed him into it, but Lloyd understands she was just eager to finish the quest. Curious, he asks why she's so invested in this mission, especially since she has no ties to the region under threat. Yui hesitates, then explains that it reminds her of her past. When she was young, her own village was destroyed by monsters. She was the only one who survived the incident, and the trauma has haunted her ever since. That's why she refuses to watch helplessly as another village faces the same fate. Suddenly, Lloyd hears sound coming from the forest and urges Yui to wake the others. They need to leave immediately. Moments later, a horde of huge spiders emerges, advancing through the forest. Initially, the group stays hidden, hoping to avoid a fight. However, Yui accidentally snaps a twig underfoot, drawing the attention of every spider. The group quickly draws their weapons, ready to battle. However, one of the spiders snatches Silica's wand and hurls it into a tree, cutting her off from casting any more attack spells. With the situation quickly escalating, Lloyd steps up and tells the others he has a plan. First, he uses enhancement magic to boost everyone's strength, then sends Yui to keep the spiders busy. Meanwhile, he orders Cross to climb the tree and get Silica's staff. Once Silica has her staff back, Lloyd instructs her and Cross to team up and launch a combined attack to take down the spiders. Though relieved his plan succeeded and everyone is unharmed, he can't help but worry that he may have overstepped by shouting out commands like that. Lloyd apologizes for taking charge, since he isn't the official leader. However, the others don't mind. His experience makes his guidance invaluable. In fact, they found his commands so useful that they'd gladly follow his lead again if they end up in another tight spot. The following morning, the group gathers their camping equipment. Once everything is stored, they're ready to resume their travels. Yet Lloyd remains distracted, troubled by the nagging suspicion that last night's spider attack wasn't just random chance, and wonder what's going on in this forest. The following day, Lloyd decides on his own to stand watch again, just in case something happens. However, the others begin to worry because staying up so late isn't good for his health. They suggest returning to their usual rotating shifts, but Lloyd insists he's fine with things as they are. He's used to staying up late. In his mind, since his skills aren't that impressive, this is the only way he can truly be of help to the team. That's completely untrue, and everyone is well aware of it. But despite all the time they've spent trying to make Lloyd see that his abilities are exceptional, he still doesn't get it. So, Silica tells her to let it go for now so they can finally get some rest before leaving, though she pleads with Lloyd not to overdo it. The following morning, the group resumes their travels, and Yui grows increasingly worried about Lloyd's lack of self-confidence, noticing him quietly casting a spell in the distance. She approaches to inquire about it. Lloyd tells her he's merely using a basic search spell to check for nearby monsters, but there's nothing basic about it. Search magic is incredibly uncommon, so much so that Yui has never encountered anyone who could wield it before. To Lloyd, though, it feels completely normal. He mentions that his search range isn't even that wide, but he believes it's best to keep using the search magic regularly throughout the trip to ensure their safety. Yui agrees it would make things much safer, but she's concerned that having Lloyd use such an advanced spell so often might put too much strain on him. She offers to help him with anything he might need, but Lloyd replies that he's fine on his own and doesn't need any assistance. That night, as Lloyd stays up to keep watch once again, Yui and Silica begin to wonder inside the tent if maybe he doesn't fully trust them. Yui knows that Lloyd is highly skilled, but up to this point, he hasn't leaned on any of his teammates, despite the fact that they're supposed to work together as companions. Silica isn't too worried after all. It's normal for teammates to take time to adjust to each other. She points out that when their group first formed, even she and Yui barely talked, but eventually they grew close. Lloyd's situation is a bit different, though for some reason he's convinced he's weak, pushing himself too hard to prove his worth, even when nobody expects him to. There's likely a reason behind the way Lloyd behaves, and she's confident that, given enough time, he'll eventually open up to them. Meanwhile, outside the tent, Lloyd is still on night watch when Daggers approaches him with a request. He asks Lloyd to lend him a hand with something. Lloyd Lloyd is more than willing to help, but he hesitates, saying he doesn't feel right leaving his post unattended. Cross then steps in and offers to take over the watch while Lloyd is away. With that, Lloyd agrees to go with Daggaz. They walk a bit deeper into the forest, where Daggaz begins setting up an intricate clapper system between the trees. Curious, Lloyd asks what it's for, and Daggaz explains that the clappers will act as an alarm, alerting them if any monsters get close, so Lloyd won't have to stay up all night on guard duty anymore. Lloyd starts to object, saying he can't use his search magic if he's asleep. In response, Daggaz questions whether Lloyd really has that little faith in him. Lloyd quickly denies it. He's constantly insisting on scouting by himself and won't let anyone else take over night watch or lend him a hand. Lloyd insists to Daggaz that he truly does trust the party. However, he explains that his master spent years drilling into him that he had to be completely independently, and the first party he joined after arriving in the capital labeled him as useless. Because of that, he felt he had to work extra hard to prove his worth. Daggaz, on the other hand, doesn't see Lloyd as a burden whatsoever, and even if he were slowing them down a bit, it wouldn't bother him in the slightest. The entire point of forming the team was so they could support one another, but it had never even crossed Lloyd's mind to lean on others for help, so hearing this is a huge eye-opener for him. Daggaz can't help but wonder what kind of harsh treatment Lloyd must have gone through to make him think this way. Still, he tells him they should just focus on getting some rest for now. The two return to camp, where Cross takes watch while Lloyd and Daggaz rest in the tent. Though Lloyd isn't accustomed to relying on others, the thought of having real companions feels comforting, and he decides to embrace it. The next morning, Lloyd approaches Yui and asks if she can help him gather water. For a moment, Yui just stares in shock. This is the very first time he's ever asked her for assistance. Yui is delighted that Lloyd is finally trusting her enough to ask for help, so she eagerly agrees. Meanwhile, in a distant castle, a man named Michael reviews a report confirming that all the magic stones have been positioned as he instructed. Satisfied, he smiles. His plan is progressing perfectly. With the monster attacks he orchestrated, nearly every adventurer in the capital has been sent away on missions, leaving the city vulnerable. Now only low-ranking adventurers and the hero's party remain in the capital. Michaels would have preferred if the hero's group had left as well, but he isn't worried. He's certain his forces can crush them without much trouble. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Lloyd and his party press onward. However, Yui grows uneasy, sensing something ominous about this place. It's unusually silent in this area, and the group finds it odd that they haven't run into a single monster since entering this part of the forest. Yui asks Lloyd if he's responsible for the monster's strange absence, but he explains that the only magic he's been using is search magic, which doesn't drive monsters away. That means something else must be frightening the monsters off. Lloyd expands the range of his search magic to try and identify the cause. After scanning, he finally detects something. He informs the group that there's a horde of monsters about 10 kilometers ahead, which according to the map is right in the direction of the farm they were headed toward. Before they discuss it further, Yui asks Lloyd if he really scanned everything within a 10-kilometer radius. Lloyd confirms it, and he doesn't think it's a big deal, but the others are stunned. They explain that even the most gifted mages can't scan anywhere near that far. Lloyd, surprised to learn that 10 kilometers is considered remarkable, instinctively tries to brush off the accomplishment as if it were nothing. Lloyd quickly downplays his ability, explaining that 10 kilometers is his absolute limit and drains his mana heavily, so he can't use it frequently. But the others aren't fooled. It's still an incredible feat. Yui grits her teeth in frustration at how oblivious he is to his own strength. Unfortunately, now isn't the time to lecture him. They still have a mission to focus on. They finally reach the farm, but despite being warned about the number of monsters, seeing it firsthand is still frightening. Aside from the sheer number of high wolves, Lloyd recalls the report mentioning that the horde included various types of monsters. He begins to question where the rest of them went. The others share his concern, knowing for sure that the forest houses creatures far stronger than the wolves present, meaning there's no way the wolves would have been the ones to dominate if a battle had occurred. Lloyd asks Yui if she knows where the farm's owner is, but she says she's not exactly sure. The request mentioned that he was injured and is currently staying with his son in the city. At that moment, Cross spots something unusual on the farm and tells the others to check it out. However, they aren't able to see anything clearly since their eyesight isn't as sharp as his. Lloyd also struggles to see what's down there, so he uses enhancement magic on his eyes. With his vision now improved, he spots a creepy-looking magic stone in the center of the farm. He then casts the same vision boost on the others, and once they all get a good look, they agree the magic stone gives off a bad vibe. However, based on Lloyd's observation, he suspects it could be some kind of beastfolk magic. His master once told him that beastfolk magic stones have the power to control monsters. That means someone is likely using this one to draw them in. To confirm his suspicions, Lloyd activates his search magic once more. Just as he feared, he detects another enormous horde of monsters coming their way. He can't help but question the motive. If someone really wanted to wipe out their party, there were far simpler methods than going through all this effort to attract monsters. Lloyd is still lost in thought, trying to make sense of the situation, but Cross snaps him out of it by reminding him that another horde of monsters is on the way, so they need to fall back immediately. Yui objects, saying they can't retreat if they do. The farm will be wiped out. Cross argues that there's no way the group can take on over 1,000 monsters by themselves, but Daggers points out that retreating might not be an option anymore. Even if they manage to escape, there's a good chance they'll lead the monsters right to the town. They're all uncertain about the best course of action, but Lloyd insists they should fight. He has a plan. First, he explains that they need to destroy the magic stone and asks Cross if he can hit it from their current position. Cross is confident in his accuracy, but given the distance, he doubts his shot will have enough force to shatter the stone in one attempt. Lloyd reassures him, saying that if power is the problem, his enhancement magic can make up the difference. Cross lines up his shot, and right before he fires, Lloyd simultaneously casts 3 different enhancements on Cross, his bow, and the arrow, maximizing the power behind the attack. The arrow streaks across the distance and obliterates the magic stone in a single hit. Cross is amazed that he actually made the shot, so he asks Lloyd how he pulled it off. Lloyd casually explains that he enhanced all 3 objects at once to amplify the force of the shot. Cross is shocked that Lloyd can enhance 3 separate targets at the same time, but Lloyd, as clueless as usual, brushes it off like it's nothing special and hardly worth mentioning. Now that the magic stone is gone, the monsters begin turning on each other, no longer under the influence of mind control. Even if they don't wipe themselves out entirely, Lloyd figures this will at least thin their numbers significantly. As for the second horde, Lloyd had been hoping they'd retreat after the crystal's destruction, but that's not the case. With the horde still charging in, everyone quickly gets into position. But as the massive wave of monsters approaches, the group starts to feel the pressure, their nerves fraying at the overwhelming sight. Lloyd urges the group to hold their attack until the monsters are within close range. Just as the creatures are about to reach Silica, he signals her to strike, and she unleashes her firestorm spell. To her shock, the flames incinerate the monsters instantly, reducing them to ash far more effectively than she ever expected. The others immediately realize something's off. Silica's magic shouldn't be this powerful. When they question Lloyd, he casually explains that he enhanced her mana efficiency while reducing the spell's cost, amplifying its destructive potential without draining her energy. With the first step done, Lloyd rushes over to Cross to get ready for the next stage. He opens a telepathic link and, using his search magic, shares the locations of all the flying monsters so Cross can snipe them through the dense smoke. One by one, the flying threats are eliminated, and with that taken care of, it's time to move on to the final part of the plan. Lloyd rushes to Silica and checks if she's finished off the monsters. She confirms she's wiped them all out, but warns that she's nearly drained of mana, leaving her unable to contribute much more. Lloyd reassures her, telling her not to worry, and asks her to take his hand. Though she's unsure of what he's planning, Silica follows his lead, and the moment their hands meet, Lloyd starts transferring his mana to her. Silica then channels that mana to cast a rain spell over the forest to extinguish the flames. Once the fires are out, she collapses, having completely drained her magic. Lloyd is worn out too, but while Yui and the others praise him for practically carrying the entire plan, all he can think about is how weak he must be to feel this exhausted after taking down 1,000 monsters. others. After Yui and Dagaz finish wiping out the remaining monsters and return to check on the others, Lloyd can't shake the suspicion that this was just a diversion and that the true target is the town of Ishtar. Yui asks what he means, so he explains by telling them that the higher-ups sending high-ranking adventurers out on quests would only get them away from Ishtar, and on top of that, he feels the monsters were deliberately sent their way to slow them down. But none of this makes sense to Cross. Ishtar already has its own hero and a ton of knights. He doesn't think the city would fall that easily since it has all that protection. Lloyd thinks about it for a second and starts to see Cross's point. However, the more Dagaz thinks about it, the more Lloyd's assumption makes sense. The whole group reflects on it and starts to believe that Ishtar must have already collapsed. Still, to be sure, Yui suggests they go back right away to check, and everyone agrees. Lloyd summons his staff and first gives everyone a magic speed boost. Then, he starts to run with superhuman speed. The others see how fast he's moving and ask him to wait up, but at the moment they start to chase after him. They discover that they can now also run with this same superhuman speed. As they run side by side, Yui asks Lloyd how this is possible. He explains that a few seconds ago, he used his magic to temporarily enhance everyone's speed, which is why they're able to run this fast. Elsewhere, Michel is just about to have his favorite glass of wine until he gets interrupted by the great General Grist. He came here to inform Michel that their vanguard is currently descending on Ishtar, which means that everything is going according to plan so far. And they say it's all thanks to the Beastfolk girl if not for her. There's no way things would have gone this far. They plan on making her come to serve them in the future as well. Michel believes they're only going to keep benefiting if they continue using her as they are right now. The General Grist isn't sure what he means by that, but since people around here refer to him as the Demon Lord's right-hand man, he trusts he'll be able to handle everything. That said, the general turns his back and walks away. Meanwhile, the girl remains in her cell, having a depressed look on her face. Michel goes down there once more to borrow her power. He's been using her magic to create those beast magic stones. At the same time, Lloyd and the others have been able to cover a long distance thanks to the speed boost they got. They choose a cool spot to stop and rest, and with the way things are going, they're confident they'll arrive back at Ishtar in no time. Lloyd whips up some more potions for everyone to help maintain their mana level, and after they're done drinking, Silica shows her concern by asking Lloyd whether using his enhancement magic on them so often is taking a toll on him. Silica heard that it requires a lot of mana to maintain enhancement magic. Lloyd replies, saying that would be true for someone who doesn't use it often, but once you get the hang of it, you can cut down the mana consumption by quite a bit. Silica is shocked to see that Lloyd is confident enough to say he's gotten to that level. He explains that he's used it a ton of times, so his body was kind of forced to adapt. While he was a kid, his master would dump him in the woods far from civilization and make him find his way back home all by himself as a form of training. He's a white mage, so fighting monsters wasn't really his strong suit, so the best he could do was run most of the time. He even had to cast all kinds of enhancement magic just to survive. It was a really traumatizing experience for him. Yui and Silica hear that sad story and can see Lloyd had really been through a lot as a kid, but Lloyd doesn't think it was a big deal. He sees it as a common training exercise. He feels he was just really inexperienced at that time. That kind of training is what made him the man he is today. His master was always scolding him during training, but now that he thinks about it, it might actually have been worth it. However, Yui disagrees, saying the training he underwent as a kid was far from normal and even quite inhumane. Silica agrees, saying his training regimen was not normal at all. When Lloyd hears this, he starts to think they meant his training wasn't even up to standard. He's suddenly filled with a sense of emptiness, believing he didn't train hard enough during his childhood. Silica and Yui try to explain that he's misunderstood, but he's already deep in thought, vowing to train even harder and do his best to support them. They see he's gotten the wrong idea, but don't even bother telling him about it because they feel it's pointless. In the next few moments, they decide to continue their journey, but before leaving, Lloyd raises his staff and uses his search magic to scan for nearby enemies. There doesn't seem to be anyone around, so they continue their journey without any obstructions. Along the way, they acknowledge how incredible the magic enhancement speed boost is. They're currently running several times faster than normal, and they haven't even broken a sweat. But just then, Lloyd stops abruptly, causing them all to trip and fall down to the ground. They ask Lloyd Lloyd why he stopped so suddenly, so he tells them that it's because he started sensing something with his search magic. He's not really sure what it is, but let's just say he has a bad feeling about it. That bad feeling leads him to making a sudden decision. He tells the rest of them to head on to Ishtar. He'll trail behind them as soon as he checks the area out and confirms that nothing is following them. Yui says there's no way they're going without him. She wants them all to go as one and check out the area, but Lloyd still insists on going alone. Yui reminds Lloyd that he's not the best when it comes to fighting monsters, and since he doesn't know for sure what is out there, it would only make sense for the rest of his party members to come along with him. Lloyd realizes there's no way he's going to change Yui's mind, so he just agrees to let them come with him. Elsewhere, 4 creepy guys in black robes are holding hands around a glowing green orb. It looks like they're about to perform some sort of ritual. Meanwhile, Lloyd traces the disturbance he sensed to an abandoned old house in the forest. Now that they've gotten here, Lloyd is fairly certain that there are some demons up inside. He can sense it clearly now that they're closer. Hearing this, Yui immediately asks if they're the ones from the Magocracy. The Magocracy is widely known as the Nation of Demons. They've been inactive a while now, but the adventurers still have to be on their toes in case they ever try to take over the continent again. Lloyd strokes his chin while he recalls that demons are strictly prohibited from entering the continent's 3 major nations. Cross and the others aren't fazed by that information because it's basically common knowledge. Turns out Lloyd doesn't have any memories of the demon invasion from when he was kid, mostly because by the time his master took him in, the war was already over. That aside, Lloyd points out the fact that if demons have already invaded, then the situation would already be really bad. Hearing this, Cross suggests they report all this to the knights when they get back to Ishtar. But before then, Lloyd tells him that he would like to gather a little more information before they report it. He knows doing that is quite dangerous, but he can't just shake the fact that he's sensing the same mana from that Magistone near the demons. Hearing that, Daggaz realizes it means the demons may be connected to whoever had that horde of monsters attack on the farm. On top of that, if the demons are planning on attacking Ishtar, Lloyd figures it just might be worth the risk. That said, they all agree to check out the demon-filled hut. They get closer and look inside the house, but to their surprise, there's no one there. Lloyd uses his search magic to confirm, and after a few seconds, he can sense their presence underground. Daggaz assumes there has to be an entrance around there somewhere, so he suggests they start looking for it. However, Lloyd tells them there's no need to look for the entrance, since Silica can use earth magic. Lloyd casts enhancement magic on everyone, and Silica uses her sandpit technique to smash through the floor, where we see those same 4 creepy guys conducting their ritual. Yui springs forward and puts her sword to their throats, asking who they are and what they're doing here. One of them tries to be slick and uses his magic to throw some rocks at Yui, but she easily blocks them. Right after, Cross shoots arrows at him that are right on target. Silica uses her sandpit technique again, causing the floor to collapse. The hooded demos try to flee, but only one manages to escape. The others get taken down by Lloyd and his team, but there's no time to celebrate. One of them is still on the loose. The demon who escaped rushes into the girl's cell and casts a spell that wraps her in a cocoon and lifts her into the air. Yui and the others arrive moments later and begin chasing after him. As Yui runs up the stairs, Lloyd tells her to take the round path to cut him off. Watching the demon flee with the girl in the cocoon, Lloyd senses a powerful magic coming from within it. They all start to chase the demon, and in the next few moments, they appear to have him surrounded. Lloyd simply asks him to surrender peacefully. He has some questions he would like to ask him, but the demon isn't going down without a fight. As a last-ditch effort, he uses his magic to launch a lightning attack on them, but Lloyd reacts in time and puts up a barrier to protect everyone. The spell backfires, and the demon ends up getting hit by his own lightning, knocking him out. They bring the cocoon down and unwrap it. Lloyd takes a single look at girl and can tell she's one of the beast folk. About 30 minutes later, they take her inside and lay her in bed. It turns out they weren't able to get any information out of the demons, meaning that this girl is the only one who has the details of what exactly happened. But considering the dire medical state she's in, they doubt she'll be able to do any talking. So Lloyd uses his healing magic on her. The others observe the healing process and are amazed at how incredible Lloyd's healing magic is as well. He even managed to cure Sylvie's magic stone transformation, which definitely isn't an easy feat. Lloyd mentions that he made a few improvements to the spell. Yui is shocked, since most adventurers aren't capable of doing that. Silica adds that being able to tweak magic is pretty impressive, but Lloyd is just as surprised as they are. His master used to force him to improve her spells all the time. Shortly after that, the girl wakes up. Yui gets a little overexcited and starts to ask her what her name is. Once she calms down, she tells Yui that her name is Claire. Yui asks her why she was being held captive by the demons, but it's obvious that Claire is so nervous that she doesn't even give a response. Lloyd speaks up and tells her that they're adventurers. He tells Claire how they received a quest to protect a farm from a horde of monsters, but along the way, he sensed beast folk mana. Lloyd heard rumors of some people having the ability to use their magic to control monsters. As he moves closer, he asks if she has that ability. Claire quietly confirms that she does. Elsewhere, some knights are seen doing a routine patrol through the woods. That's when they stumble upon a giant magic stone and decide to touch it. The moment one of them touches it, they get surrounded by several red-eyed wolves. They then run for their lives while being chased by the wolves. Back in the house, Lloyd learns that the demons had Claire chained up in that cell and were forcing her to use her power of controlling monsters. Hearing this, things make a lot more sense now. The demons captured Claire in order to use the monsters in their army. Ishtar is currently being attacked by the Magocracy, meaning if they get control over the city, it'll be much easier to invade the continent. There's now a big chance that Ishtar is already destroyed, so Lloyd suggests they get back there as fast as possible. He grants Claire the magic enhancement speed boost, which allows them all to move at the same pace. On reaching the next landmark, they stop to rest and drink water. That's when Lloyd uses his searching magic once more, but this time he senses a horde of monsters headed towards Ishtar. But that's not all. There's a large army following behind them. Everyone looks to Lloyd, asking him what they should do now. He thinks about it for a moment and tells Claire he's going to need to borrow her power, and as for the others, he tells them to go and warn the city and prepare for battle. Before they leave, Lloyd hits them with another round of enhancement magic, which restores them to full health and stamina, after which the two teams set off in opposite directions, hoping their efforts will be enough to save Ishtar. Back at Ishtar, Alan angrily swipes several party application documents off his desk. He's frustrated because he thinks every applicant is too weak to join his party. He's in search of a support mage, but in his eyes, every last one of the applicants are even worse than Lloyd when he was with them. The girls tell Alan that this is the best selection of support mages in the area, but Alan refuses to accept anyone that can't even use storage magic. Lena says she actually considered Lloyd to be rather exceptional, but Alan doesn't feel that way about Lloyd in the slightest. He considers him nothing but a piece of trash. Alan considers whether it would be wise for their party to continue without a support mage, but that's when someone knocks on the door. A knight opens it to inform Alan that a horde of monsters is advancing on Ishtar. The troops patrolling the forest reported that they saw over 10,000 monsters. Alan gasps in shock. The knights are currently working on establishing defensive lines and have come all this way to ask Alan and his party for help defeating the monsters. Alan agrees to help them without hesitation. This gives the knight a feeling of reassurance after he hears this. The knight then walks out to inform his comrades of the good news. The other party members question Alan on whether agreeing to help them so quickly was a good idea. Alan smirks while explaining to them that this was a direct request from the king, so there was literally no way he could turn that down. Other than that, he figures it would be a good way for him to show off just how strong he is. Lena hears that and doesn't like the sound of it one bit. In the forest near Ishtar, Lloyd and Claire watch from a cliff as countless monsters move below. Lloyd had already expected a large number, and this group is just as big as the one heading toward Ishtar. He believes the city won't stand a chance if a horde this size joins the main attackers. Maybe splitting up the party was the right choice after all. Lloyd says they need to wipe out this group somehow, but Claire feels sorry for the monsters, knowing they're being controlled by the demonic power she helped create. She asks Lloyd whether it would be possible to stop the monsters without hurting them. It's obvious to Lloyd that Claire really cares about these monsters, so he tells her that he'll think of a way to free the horde while causing as little harm as possible. He feels it's best to resolve matters without killing anyway. Lloyd suggests Claire use her magic to peacefully send the monsters back to their homes, but she's not sure if she'll be able to pull that off, especially since there are so many of them. Lloyd has the idea of supplementing her mana and augmenting her spell to make it stronger. He asks her whether that would be enough to pull off, and Claire replies, saying she's willing to give it a shot. She steps forward and begins using her spell, causing her to emit a bright green aura, but then her spell gets blocked, making her realize that there has to be something in the forest causing interference. Meanwhile, at the local adventurers guild, Alan and his party members are there and still in search of a worthy support mage for their squad. Turns out all the high-ranked adventurers are currently unavailable, so everyone here is either in B rank or below. Alan doesn't think any of them are worthy of joining his party, so he just begins to insult them, calling them all worthless pieces of trash. The adventurers quickly get pissed off and are about to fight back, but that's when the guild master steps in and tells them to cut it out. Now that things have calmed down, Alan decides to give the adventurers a rundown of his plan when facing the horde of monsters. First, the mages are to unleash their most powerful spells on the monsters. He expects those spells to take out at least 10 monsters each. Then, he and the other fighters will go head to head with the monsters and buy time for the support mages to recover their mana. And once they do, they'll just fire another round of spells. Alan plans on them repeating that sequence until the horde of monsters has been totally defeated. However, the mages among the adventurers don't feel so confident about that plan because they aren't capable of using magic that powerful. Maya also speaks up and says that she doesn't feel confident about that plan either because the power of her spells has dropped off recently, so she doubts if she'll be able to draw that kind of magic. Alan gasps in shock as he hears this, and he asks her why she would keep quiet about something like this for so long. But Maya says it's not just her. The other members in the team like Lulu, Sheena, and Lena also have noticed a significant drop in strength ever since Lloyd left the party. Hearing this makes Alan furious because he feels his teammates have just been deceiving him all along. But Lena steps in, telling Alan it's his fault for not noticing it up until now. Moreover, Lena noticed that Alan has grown more complacent as a hero and hasn't done any training in a while. The other adventurers are shocked to hear that Alan hasn't been training all this while. His emotions get the best of him, so he throws a punch at Lena, but she effortlessly catches it with her palm. He's surprised how Lena got strong enough to stop one of his punches. Embarrassed, he runs out of the building while telling them not to blame him for whatever happens next. All the party members except Lena chase after Alan. The adventurers are currently in a state of shock. This is their first time encountering Alan in real life, and he's nothing like the rumors make him out to be. Left with no other option, they believe all they can do is run away from the monster horde that's approaching. But Lena speaks up and urges them all to keep their cool. She informs them that she'll be leaving Alan's party. She feels she has a better shot at winning if she fights alongside them, the adventurers. The adventurers are already aware of how powerful she is, so they have no objections. But before they head to the battlefield, Lena asks if they've seen a boy named Lloyd today. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Lloyd and Claire are hiding in the bushes as they discover a giant magistone that's being guarded by some wolf monsters. Claire's theory is that the magistone is imbued with an evil power that's interfering with her spell. She also assumes that there are multiple magistones just like this one, and unless they're able to deal with all of them, she won't be able to control the monsters with her spell. Lloyd hears that and says what they need to do now is discover the locations of the other magistones. Claire would easily be able to sense them if they were close, but she's unable to do so over large distances like this. To solve that problem, Lloyd summons his magic staff and uses it to expand Claire's senses. That way, she'll be able to track the magistones even over large distances. He also uses some concealment magic on them both, so they'll be able to get close to the magistones without raising an alarm. However, the spell breaks with heavy impact, so he warns Claire to be careful. Just as planned, they manage to move past the wolves undetected and disable the magistone. After it's disabled, the wolves are no longer being controlled, so they just walk away from each each other. Meanwhile, the army of Ishtar sets formation at the castle gates, awaiting the monster horde's attacks. However, the guild master knows that even with this large army, their lives all depend on none other than Lloyd. Early, at the Adventurers Guild, Lena explains to the other adventurers that Lloyd was the only reason Alan's hero party was so successful, even though he was a mere white mage. Hearing that, the adventurers wonder why they kicked Lloyd out of their party if he was really the reason behind their success. Lena explains that all the others, including herself, grew overconfident in their strength without realizing that it was all thanks to Lloyd's support magic. Lena believes they might still be able to turn things around with Lloyd's help, so she asks the adventurers whether any of them have an idea where he is. The guild master happens to keep tabs on every adventurer that's registered with the guild. His reports say that Lloyd is currently out on a monster slaying quest with an S-rank party, but the location is so far away that the trip alone would take them a few days to arrive. However, Lena believes that Lloyd would be able to shorten their travel time with the help of his support magic, but she realizes her plan won't work if the adventurers don't put all their faith in Lloyd, so she asks them whether they're willing to. Later that day, the adventurers set up their formation and wait for the incoming monsters. The horde charges straight toward them, but the adventurers hold their ground, fighting back with the resources they have. The guild master watches the battle unfold and thinks that if they can hold out until Lloyd and the other S-rankers return, they might just have a chance to survive. Later that night in the forest, the other half of Lloyd's party have just taken a break to rest after running for hours towards Ishtar. They're relieved because they know it won't take long before they arrive. Things have been going well for them so far, all thanks to Lloyd's support magic. They assume Lloyd is doing everything in his power to save Ishtar right now, so they can't afford to get lazy now. That said, they decide to continue their journey. Meanwhile, Lloyd and Claire have just deactivated the last Magistone without being detected by the wolves, but things take a foul turn as the High Wolves and Blood Panthers start to fight each other. From what Claire can see, they've chosen to fight rather than return back into the forest. In the middle of the fight, they end up knocking over the Magistone, which hits Claire, allowing her concealment magic to wear off. The wolves instantly spot Claire and turn their attention towards her. So, to save Claire, Lloyd disables his concealment magic and shoots a flare in the sky, drawing the wolves' attention towards him. Back in the city, things aren't looking so good for the adventurers because their front line has just been breached by a wave of monsters, and to make matters worse, even more monsters are seen to be approaching with horrific speed. But just before they collide with the adventurers, the monsters get hit with a wave of fire. The guild master looks on and is delighted to see that the S-ranked adventurers have finally arrived. Meanwhile, Lloyd is still holding his ground against the wolves. He's easily able to dodge their attacks now that he's used some physical enhancement magic, but he knows it's only a matter of time before his body gives out. Claire observes Lloyd's fighting style and notices that he's only dodging and not attacking at all. She realizes he's doing that because she previously told him that she didn't want to hurt the monsters, and he's doing that for her sake. Lloyd has just about reached his limit and is about to get eaten by the wolves, but that's when he starts to hear Claire's beautiful singing. The wolves instantly stop attacking Lloyd and focus on her instead. Then, after her song is done, the wolves just casually walk away like nothing happened. Lloyd rushes over to her for an explanation of what just happened, so Claire explains that all she did was use her singing to persuade the wolves to return to the forest. She lets Lloyd know that her power doesn't directly let her control monsters, it actually just lets her convey her thoughts to them. Back at Ishtar, even with the S-ranked adventurers, their team is quickly getting overpowered by the monsters. Things get so bad that all the adventurers have already accepted defeat. There's simply nothing more they can do. As dawn breaks, the guild master watches from above and has no choice but to accept the same fate. But just then, Claire's beautiful singing is heard again. Lloyd uses his support magic to help project her voice over that long distance, and after a few moments, the monsters no longer lead an attack. They just turn their backs and walk away. The adventurers look towards the cliff top and see that this is all Lloyd and Claire's doing. Lloyd is really impressed with how Claire is able to communicate with monsters. He finds it really fascinating. But Claire tells Lloyd that she's the one to be thanking him because there's no way she would have been able to project her power across that long distance on her own. Lloyd admits he may have been of help, but there's no doubt that it was her power that saved both the monsters and the adventurers. Still, Lloyd knows they can't start celebrating just yet because there's still a life-threatening battle ahead of them, as he spots a horde of rock golems approaching the city. Meanwhile, Michel sits in his office, happily sipping wine, convinced that Ishtar has already been crushed by 30,000 monsters. But suddenly, one of his servants enters to give a report about the situation at the front lines. Hearing this, Michel smirks, assuming the monsters must have already captured Ishtar. But to his surprise, the servant says the monsters' advance was actually stopped, and they have now begun retreating. Shocked, Michel immediately stands up, unable to believe what he just heard. At the same time, Lloyd and Claire are still on the battlefield, and they notice that some of the golems haven't retreated like the others because they didn't hear Claire's song. Seeing this, Lloyd raises his staff and strengthens both of their physical abilities, giving them the speed to run past the golems for a short while. But then, one of them lands an attack that's far stronger than Lloyd expected. Luckily, he dodges it in time, but this makes him realize that the golems themselves have been magically enhanced. The two of them keep pushing forward, but their biggest problem now is the giant pit ahead of them. Just before reaching it, Lloyd smoothly grabs Claire by the waist and leaps across the pit with her. Everyone else watching is left speechless. So this is the true Lloyd everyone has been talking about. After landing safely, Yui's party members are relieved and overjoyed to see that both he and Claire made it back in one piece. They quickly acknowledge that it was thanks to Claire's song that the monsters retreated, and with the monsters gone, they feel like victory is finally within reach. However, Lloyd tells them not to celebrate yet, since they still need to deal with the golems, who are still a serious threat. But right then, Lloyd suddenly collapses from fatigue. The others rush to him and quickly realize he's been pushing himself too hard, exhausting his body by constantly casting support magic. Still, Lloyd forces himself back up, insisting that he's fine and that everyone should keep their focus on the battles still ahead. The guild master and several knights then approach, and Lloyd decides to place Claire in their care until everything is settled. The guild master nods in agreement, promising to have the knights protect her. Lloyd then turns to Claire and thanks her deeply for everything she's done, saying that without her, they never would have made it this far. But Claire tells him not to be so modest, because he also saved her when she needed it most, and leaves. The guild master looks at Lloyd and admits he's glad Lloyd arrived in time, because right now, he is Ishtar's last hope. Hearing that, Lloyd is confused until Lena joins the conversation and explains that he's the last hope because Alan never joined the battle at all. Lloyd is shocked and immediately asks why. Lena then explains that Alan abandoned his duties and ran off after having a clash with some adventurers at the guild. Hearing this, Lloyd gets furious, since Alan always boasted about being a hero, yet when the city needed him most, he turned his back and left, putting countless citizens' lives in danger. Lena calls Alan nothing but a fraud, but right after saying that, she clutches her arm in pain as blood pours from the stab wound she received earlier. Lloyd notices immediately and tells her to stay still. He then uses his support magic to heal the wound instantly. The guild master watches and is truly impressed. However, the constant use of support magic begins to take its toll on Lloyd, and he faints once again. This time, Lena manages to catch him before he falls. When Lloyd manages to stand back up, Lena speaks to him honestly. She admits that she never realized he was the one who had been holding their team together all along. He was the backbone of their group, but she failed to see it back then, and she didn't even protest when he was kicked out, so she apologizes deeply. But Lloyd shakes his head and tells her it's not her fault, because he was removed simply for lacking strength. Just then, a group of golems begins marching toward them. The knights notice there aren't many golems left, so they decide this is the perfect chance to attack. They immediately charge in, but Lloyd shouts shouts out, warning them not to engage because these aren't ordinary golems. The knights ignore the warning and strike, but their blades don't even scratch the golem. Instead, their weapons break on impact, and the golem counters with a crushing blow that knocks a knight down. Seeing that, the mages step in and fire long-range spells, but their magic has no effect either. The party realizes that their formation is beginning to crumble, and they panic, wondering what their next move should be. Lloyd steps forward and declares that he will cast enhancement magic on everyone present. His allies are stunned to hear this. There are far too many people on the battlefield, and they fear Lloyd's body won't be able to handle casting support spells on such a massive scale. But Lloyd insists he'll be fine, though he admits he can only strengthen one group at a time. Even so, Cross is impressed, because most people can't even enhance a single group, let alone multiple ones. Lloyd then begins casting enhancements, covering every group on the battlefield, but once he's finished, he collapses again from the overwhelming strain on his body. Even so, he quickly informs his party members about the buffs he has given. The frontline fighters have received physical enhancements. The magic unit has been boosted in spell power, and his party members have received their own reinforcements as well. However, Lloyd warns that the effects won't last long, so they need to finish the fight quickly. As the golems draw closer, Yui climbs up into the search tower and shouts out to everyone below and announcing that Lloyd has cast incredible enhancement magic on the entire force. And with these buffs, they now stand a real chance of overcoming even an outnumbered battle. But despite her words, the knights still don't feel fully confident, hesitation written all over their faces. One of the knights lowers his guard and is about to be crushed by a golem strike, but Lena rushes in at the last second and uses her shield to block the attack. Right after, Yui leaps down and slices the golem clean in half with her sword. Seeing this, Lena shouts to everyone that this is the power of Lloyd's enhancement magic, and if they all fight together, they can definitely bring the golems down. The others finally realize it too, noticing that their bodies feel lighter, faster, and stronger than before. Yui reminds them that this boost is all thanks to Lloyd, and if they want his efforts to mean something, they need to win this fight. Fired up by her words, everyone roars in agreement. Meanwhile, Lloyd gives quick orders. He tells Cross to move to the magic unit and instructs Dagas to protect Silica on the front lines. After sending them off, Lloyd nearly collapses again, but a knight manages to catch him before he falls. The guild master urges him to take a moment to breathe and recover. On the battlefield, everyone unleashes their strongest attacks against the golems. Thanks to Lloyd's enhancements, those attacks are finally landing heavy, devastating blows. Watching from above, Lloyd sees this and urges them to keep pushing, because it looks like they truly have a chance at victory now. Back on the ground, almost all the golems are defeated, leaving only one still standing. Yui smirks, thinking this last one will be easy. A knight steps in to deliver the final blow, but to his shock, his blade shatters on impact. The golem counters immediately, smashing him into the ground. From a distance, Lloyd realizes what this means. His enhancement magic has worn off. As expected, fear spreads quickly. The soldiers panic, scattering in different directions, leaving only Lloyd's party members to face the final golem. Yui is about to be struck directly, but Dagas steps in at the last second to shield her, summoning the little mana he has left. Lloyd forces himself to cast one more round of enhancement magic, but with his energy nearly gone, he can only strengthen their weapons instead of their bodies. Yui looks down at her sword and sees the magical glow from Lloyd's spell. She knows she can't waste this chance. With determination, she calls on Lena and Dagas for support. The two boost her up, and Yui leaps off their backs, channeling everything into one final strike. Her sword slices through with overwhelming force, destroying the last golem in a single blow. With the enemy finally defeated, the soldiers erupt into cheers, celebrating their success in protecting Ishtar. From his spot on the tower, Lloyd lets out a long breath of relief. With the battle finally over, he allows himself to faint at last, this time in peace. Meanwhile, Will watches from a distance on a cliffside and notices that Lloyd seems to be thriving here, even more than when he was still part of the hero team. Later that same day, Grist storms into Michelle's office to deliver the bad news about their failed operation, but when he enters, he's stunned to see that Michelle isn't there. At that moment, Grist realizes he's been scammed. Furious, he wrecks Michelle's office in a fit of rage, and once he's finished, he swears that he will kill anyone who dares interfere with his plans. That same day, Lloyd wakes up inside a cozy-looking inn. Yui enters happily, relieved to see that he's finally awake, since he had been sleeping the entire day. Lloyd apologizes, blaming it on the fact that he isn't powerful enough. Yui tells him that he always talks down on himself, so in order to boost his confidence, she takes him outside to meet the crowd of Ishtar citizens who have been waiting for him to wake up. As soon as they see him, they cheer loudly and praise Lloyd, calling him Ishtar's hero. Yui smirks, thinking this will surely give him the confidence boost he needs, but instead, Lloyd shuts the door immediately, saying that it's way too many people. Yui quickly opens the door again and urges him to at least greet his fans, but before she realizes it, Lloyd dives straight out of the window and runs off down the alley to escape. Meanwhile, over at Merlin's place, Will stops by to see her. Just as he's about to open the door, a massive explosion erupts. Merlin steps out, and Will jokes that blowing things up isn't exactly the best way to greet a guest. Inside, Will finds Thor and Lily sitting at the table, so he waves to them in greeting. Will is a well-known alchemist, but recently, he stopped making potions. Curious, Lily asks him why, and Will replies that he's stopped for now because his main focus is gathering information. Merlin then asks about Lloyd, and Will tells them that Lloyd was kicked out of the hero team. Merlin is shocked at the news, but Will quickly reassures her that Lloyd has now joined an S-rank adventure party. Hearing this, the others are stunned, since none of them ever expected something like that from Lloyd. Meanwhile, Lloyd stands on a balcony, looking down nervously at the huge crowd who had come just to see him. That's when his party members arrive to check on him. Lloyd asks them why everyone keeps chasing him around. Cross tells him to relax, explaining that the people are only here because they want to show their gratitude for saving them. But Lloyd insists that he only provided minor assistance to those who were actually on the front lines. Hearing this, Yui gets annoyed that Lloyd keeps putting himself down. Dagas bluntly tells Lloyd that he's setting impossible standards for himself and only torturing his own heart. Lena steps forward with a serious expression and firmly tells Lloyd that he needs to start having more confidence in his own abilities. The story then shifts back to Will, who is telling his companions that the real problem with Lloyd is that he's simply too earnest. Because of that, he never truly recognizes the extent of his own capabilities. Merlin looks worried as she says she doesn't want Lloyd to repeat the same mistake she once made. Meanwhile, Lloyd goes downstairs to meet the citizens waiting for him. The moment they see him, they cheer loudly and shower him with praise. Lloyd tries to explain that it was really the knights on the front lines who should be receiving this kind of recognition, not him. But one of the knights steps forward and says it was only thanks to Lloyd's enhancement magic that they were able to fight at all. The citizens agree and begin chanting Lloyd's name as their hero. Lloyd feels overwhelmed at being treated like a hero, but Dagas just tells him to relax and enjoy it. After hesitating, Lloyd finally accepts their praise. Meanwhile, Alan is furious when he hears the news that Lloyd has been hailed as a hero. His own party members immediately recognize the danger of this, knowing that if things continue, their official hero titles might be revoked since they refuse to accept the emergency mission. Frustrated, Alan orders his team to pack their things, saying they're leaving town immediately because he refuses to stay in a place where Lloyd is celebrated as a hero. At the same time, Will and his companions sit together, and Thor guesses that Will didn't call them there just for drinks, but to honor Sybil. Will smirks and admits it's true. He then explains that the demon race has been controlling monsters to try and conquer Ishtar, using the orcs' magic as a tool to do it. What he doesn't understand is why the demon army would choose to act so aggressively at a time like this. That leads him to suspect that the demon king has returned. Hearing this, Merlin stands up immediately in shock, insisting that can't be true because the demon king was already vanquished. Thor tells her to calm down, reminding her that panicking won't solve anything. The group agrees that if they want to protect the future, they have to do everything in their power. The next day, Lloyd and his party are summoned by the Lord of Ishtar to discuss the city's protection. As they wait outside, they wonder nervously what the Lord will be like, especially since none of them even know what he looks like. Just then, a man who looks like a butler approaches them and invites them inside. When they enter, They are surprised to see Claire. They ask if she was also summoned by the Lord, but the man quickly clarifies that she is his honored guest. He then introduces himself as Lord Abel Lucas, the true Lord of Ishtar. Everyone is stunned and quickly apologize for not addressing him properly, since they assumed he was a butler or even a gardener. Abel asks why they are so surprised, and they explain that they had always heard the Lord of Ishtar had ruled for decades, so they expected him to be much older. Abel laughs lightly and explains that he really is elderly, but he uses youth enhancement magic on himself, which is why he appears so young. Everyone takes a sit, and Abel reveals that Claire is actually the second princess of the Forest Empire. Everyone is shocked to hear this. None of them ever imagined she was such an important figure. Abel adds that because Claire's rare ability to control monsters is so valuable, they cannot allow her to be captured by the demon race. That is why the Empire has been searching for her. Abel then presents the group with a sealed envelope and explains their next mission. They are to escort Claire safely to Sylphs, the royal capital of the Kingdom of Furin, where her people will be waiting to retrieve her. Everyone is stunned by this request, since escort missions of this importance are usually handled by knights, not adventurers. Abel explains that he chose not to send knights because they would attract far too much attention, and the demon race would quickly catch on. In the end, Lloyd and his party accept the mission, and so, the very next day, they set out together to begin their journey toward the royal capital. After a long period of traveling, the group decides to stop in the forest to rest. Lloyd studies his map and points out that if they keep walking a little farther, they'll reach a town where they can finally settle down for the day. Cross mutters about how they've been on the road for 10 straight days and still haven't made it to the capital. It's much farther than he thought, but Dagas explains that they purposely took the longer route just to avoid running into any potential problems. Yui then looks over at Claire and tells her the next town is famous for its hot spring. Hearing this, Claire looks confused, admitting she's never been to one before. While Yui continues chatting with her, Cross quietly observes and comments that Yui is acting way too calm about everything. Dagas quickly tells him not to say that, insisting that Yui is only being considerate for Claire's sake. Lloyd, who's lost in the conversation, asks what they mean. Cross explains that even though this is an escort mission, if everyone stayed on edge all the time, it would wear Claire down. She needs someone to keep things light and make the atmosphere less stressful. As they talk, Silica joins in, saying she's also heard the same thing. Back in her own kingdom, Claire rarely got the chance to go outside, so she feels Yui just wants Claire to experience the beauty of the outside world. By sunset, they finally arrive at the town, and as soon as they get there, Yui excitedly suggests they head straight for the hot spring. Cross notices this and rolls his eyes, starting to think Yui isn't acting this relaxed just for Claire's sake. About 30 minutes later, Yui and Silica slip out of their clothes and step into the hot spring. From the calm, relieved looks on their faces, it's obvious they're enjoying themselves. But after a little while, they realize Claire is missing. Yui glances back and spots her, still wrapped in a towel, crouched awkwardly in the corner. With her face red from embarrassment, Claire admits she has never bathed with anyone before and feels awkward about others seeing her naked. Yui and Silica smile warmly and reassure her that it's completely normal to feel that way at first, but once she tries it, she'll become much more comfortable and confident. Yui then gently offers her hand, encouraging Claire to join them in the bath. Claire hesitates for a moment, but finally gathers her courage and steps in, still holding her towel around her. A few moments later, after she finally removes her towel, Yui pops up from the water and stares directly at Claire's chest. Examining her body carefully, Yui suddenly compliments her, saying she's really beautiful, but Claire doesn't agree. She looks down at herself with shame and mutters that she's too skinny, and she doesn't even have a busty figure like they do. The mention of that makes Silica start to get a little jealous, realizing that Yui's chest has actually grown larger than hers. Hearing this, Yui checks and confirms that yes, hers has definitely surpassed Silica's. Annoyed, Silica smirks and teases Yui, saying the only reason her chest has grown is because she's been stuffing her face with snacks ever since they left Ishtar and has just gotten fat. Embarrassed, Yui tries to fire back with a comeback, but fails miserably. It even gets so bad that even Claire can't help but laugh. Yui points at her in protest, and Claire quickly apologizes, but Silica just tells her it's fine, saying they might as well laugh at Yui for letting herself go. Meanwhile, on the other side of the hot springs, the guys are scrubbing each other's backs. As As Lloyd scrubs, his mind drifts into deep thought. He realizes that the closer they get to the capital, the higher the chances of encountering demons. If the enemy intends to capture Claire, he expects them to make their move soon. The thought weighs heavily on him, so he gets a little carried away and starts scrubbing Cross's back harder and harder. Feeling the rough scrubbing, Cross yells out in pain. After the bath, the group gathers for a meeting. Lloyd suggests they remain in the town a bit longer, explaining that he has preparations to make. Silica thinks it over and agrees, saying it's a good idea to prepare as much as possible. Yui asks what everyone else thinks. Daggers raises his hand and says he's all for staying behind, since he's been meaning to pick up some new gear for battle. Silica adds that there are also some spells she's been eager to test out. Cross has no complaints either, so they all agree to stay in town a little longer and prepare themselves for what's ahead. Even so, Lloyd's mind isn't at ease. Quietly, he thinks to himself that in order to protect Claire and keep fighting alongside his friends, he'll need to become much stronger. The next day, Daggers steps out of yet another shop, disappointed that he still hasn't found any new battle gear that really stands out to him. Daggers looks to the side when he hears Yui call out to him. She and Claire have just returned from sightseeing around the town. Yui asks what he's been up to, and Daggers explains that he's been visiting one weapon shop after another, trying to buy a shield, but still hasn't found one that suits him. After searching nearly every shop in town, he's starting to lose hope. Hearing this, Claire speaks up and says she noticed a weapon shop in a back alley earlier. She describes it as a small, old-looking shop and asks if he's checked there yet. Later that afternoon, Daggers heads over to the shop. When he arrives, he's surprised to see that there's no one in there. He walks toward the shield collection and is immediately struck by how high quality they look. Just then, his focus is interrupted by a grumpy old man who takes one look at Daggers and instantly assumes he's a thug. Daggers quickly explains that he's only here to buy weapons. Hearing that, the old man calms down and casually tells him to look around and pick whatever he wants. Daggers spends a few minutes examining the weapons and can tell right away that the craftsmanship is far superior to anything he's seen in other shops. That makes him wonder why this place isn't overflowing with customers. Just as he's thinking that, a group of adventurers walk in. They're shocked to see someone else inside, and when Daggers tells them he's here to buy weapons, they burst out laughing. Their leader mocks him, saying he must be a low-ranking adventurer if he's buying from the most poorly rated weapon shop in town. At that moment, the shop owner steps out and immediately recognizes the group. He calls them out as thugs who've been harassing his business and angrily tells them to get out. The leader smirks and tells the shopkeeper to calm down, insisting it's not their fault his store isn't getting any sales. Daggers steps forward and bluntly asks if they're just a bunch of loan sharks. The leader waves it off and tells Daggers to relax, insisting they're nothing like that. Then they points out that since Daggers doesn't even know who their boss is, he must be an outsider. They proudly announce that their boss is none other than Galland, a famous rank adventurer. Hearing the name, Daggers realizes Galland is well known in this region. With that in mind, he asks why such a powerful adventurer would waste his time on petty intimidation like this. Galland says he's here because the shopkeeper refuses to sell him a piece of Lioness's legacy, but the old shopkeeper snaps back, declaring that he'll never hand it over to someone like Galland. He insists that he'll only sell it to someone truly worthy of wielding its power. Enraged, Galland cracks his knuckles, preparing to beat the old man for refusing his demand, but before he can act, Daggers steps in and raises his voice, reminding them all that this isn't how true adventurers should behave. That statement enrages one of the adventurers, and he rushes at Daggers with a punch, but the strike is far too weak for him, so Daggers easily catches it with one hand, twists the man's arm, and makes him cry out in pain. Without hesitation, Daggers summons a shield using his storage magic and slams it forward, knocking the group out of the shop and onto the ground. Galland gets up and glares at him, demanding to know how Daggers could possibly overpower them if he's just a low-ranked adventurer. In response, Daggers calmly pulls out his guild card and shows it, saying he doesn't mean to brag, but he's actually an S-rank adventurer. Galland freezes, unable to believe what he just heard. The shop owner is equally shocked. He immediately asks why Daggers didn't mention his S-rank from the beginning. Daggers simply scratches his head and says he thinks bragging about ranks is lame. He then shuts the shop door as Galland and his men storm off, swearing vengeance. After they're gone, the shop owner looks at Daggers with a firm, serious expression and tells him there's something important he wants to entrust him with. At the inn, Lloyd just sits down with a magic circle spread out in front of him, carefully making adjustments. Yui and Claire walk in and spot him at work. Yui notices the pattern and asks if he's practicing research magic. Lloyd nods and explains that he's mostly trying to strengthen his support spells. He even considered learning new magic, but he doesn't know where to start. Hearing this, Yui suggests that he try picking up some offensive spells. Lloyd admits that it's possible, but then compares himself to Silica. He says if Silica's offensive power is like a raging wildfire, then his would barely compare to a single matchstick. Yui is stunned to hear that Silica is that powerful when it comes to offensive magic. Lloyd explains that's exactly how impressive she is, because very few mages in the world can match her abilities. Meanwhile, deep into the forest, Silica is training alone. Even though she knows how much stronger she's gotten over time, she still admits to herself that on their last mission, if Lloyd hadn't been there, the outcome could have gone very differently. With a serious expression, she realizes that she must keep getting stronger, no matter what. Summoning her staff, she attempts to cast a high-level fire spell, but the spell fizzles out before it can form properly, fading because she let her mana scatter too far away. She sighs in frustration, discouraged that despite training for several days straight, she's still struggling with it. Still, she clenches her fist and refuses to let this setback defeat her. Back at the inn, Lloyd, Yui, and Claire are gathered around the table drinking tea. Yui starts talking about Silica, calling her a true genius. She explains that Silica has been called a prodigy and a gifted mage ever since she was young. Claire listens and says Silica really is amazing, but Yui says that's not the only thing that makes her incredible. Ever since childhood, she's known Silica as the kind of person who refuses to give up. No matter how many times she fails, Silica always pushes forward, willing to put in as much time and effort as needed until she succeeds. Back in the forest, Silica continues practicing. Over and over, she tries the advanced spell, refusing to stop until she gets it right. At last, after countless attempts, she finally succeeds. Her face lights up with excitement, and she jumps with joy, but in her excitement, she slips and falls flat on her butt. The spell flares out uncontrollably, ending in a loud explosion. Lying on the ground in embarrassment, Silica wonders why she's always so clumsy. She realizes that when she's with the others, she's careful and composed, but when she's alone, she tends to let her guard down. Silica decides she should probably call it a day and start heading back, but just as she turns, she hears movement from the bushes. Instinctively, she assumes it's a monster and raises her staff, ready to attack, but it's only Daggaz stepping out. To explain how he ended up here, the scene shifts back to earlier at the weapon shop. The shop owner tells Daggaz that the shield before him is a great shield forged by the legendary blacksmith Lioness. Its name is Aegis. When Daggaz sees it, he realizes this must be the item Galland mentioned earlier. The shop owner explains that Aegis was crafted from the world's sturdiest ores and timber. It's said to be so durable that it can block any attack without ever breaking. He adds that he's never given it to anyone because most adventurers today are too weak to wield such a weapon. But after watching Daggaz, he believes Daggaz is both strong and worthy, so he's willing to entrust it to him. Daggaz is stunned, asking if he's really planning to hand over something so precious. The shop owner explains he'll give it to him, but only under one condition. He goes on to say that recently, people have been reporting mysterious explosions near the spring in the forest. The townsfolk fear it's the work of a monster. Hearing this, Daggaz quickly realizes the owner wants him to deal with whatever is causing the destruction as a final test to prove himself worthy of Aegis. Back to the present, Daggaz explains the situation to Silica in the woods. Silica looks embarrassed, shocked that people mistook her for a monster, but Daggaz points at the massive crater she left behind during training and says she can't really blame them. The water spring has been completely ruined because of her magic practice. Later that evening, Daggaz brings Silica to the weapon shop. The owner is surprised to hear that all the destruction in the forest came from this small girl. Silica bows and apologizes, explaining that she already used her magic to repair the spring she damaged. The shop owner waves it off, saying he isn't angry since no real harm was done. As part of the deal, he declares that Daggaz is free to take Aegis. Daggaz hesitates and asks if the man is really sure, since technically he never fought any monster. order, but the shopkeeper insists, saying he admires Dagaz's strength and sincerity, and that's reason enough. Grateful, Dagaz accepts and takes the shield with gratitude. That night, Dagaz shows the team his new shield, and everyone agrees it looks incredible. Silica adds her own good news, proudly sharing that she finally managed to learn an advanced fire spell. Yui is thrilled and eagerly asks her to show it off sometime. Silica smiles and promises she will when the chance comes. Lloyd praises both of them, saying it's impressive and that he hopes to learn from their growth. Cross, however, starts to feel a little pressured by all the accomplishments, thinking maybe he should be doing something too. But Yui quickly tells him not to worry, reminding him that rushing won't help. Instead, they should all just focus on doing their best, step by step. With that, she cheerfully suggests they all go have dinner together at a brand new restaurant that just opened in town. The next day, Cross strolls through town, but his mind isn't at ease. He's still dwelling on how he can become stronger. He remembers that Silica and Dagaz are already seeing progress, and he can't stand the thought of being the only one left behind. He's already done things like getting a new weapon and training hard. Yet he doubts that alone will make a real difference. As he keeps thinking about ways to improve, a clumsy boy named Lin bumps into him and falls to the ground. Cross quickly offers his hand to help him up. Lin apologizes right away for being careless, but Cross doesn't take it personally. He says it was both their fault since neither of them were paying much attention to where they were going. While helping him up, Cross notices a necklace that marks him as part of a guild, so he asks if Lin is an adventurer. Nervously, Lin admits that he is. Once he realizes Cross is an adventurer too, Lin awkwardly asks if they can team up. Cross is caught off guard by the sudden request. A few minutes later, Lin leads Cross to the town's adventurer guild. After looking around, Cross comments that while it's smaller than the guild in Ishtar, it clearly has more active members. Lin thanks him for agreeing to partner up with a total stranger, but Cross shrugs it off, saying it's no big deal since it's just for this one time. Honestly, after seeing Lin's puppy dog eyes, it was too hard for Cross to refuse. Some adventurers inside notice Lin brought someone new with him. They don't recognize Cross, so they assume he's just a newcomer. Whispering among themselves, they mock Lin, calling him a useless E-ranker who drags down anyone unlucky enough to team up with him. Cross overhears their words and finally understands why Lin was so desperate to find a partner. Lin realizes Cross has figured out his rank and apologizes for making him work with someone so weak. Cross tells him not to stress over it, and even admits that he himself is stuck at his own rank. Lin misunderstands, assuming Cross is low-ranked just like him. Cross doesn't correct him, figuring it might actually make Lin feel more comfortable. With that, he suggests they take a look at the quest board. Meanwhile, Yui has gotten her hands on a map marking all the best dessert shops in town, and her plan for the day is simple: visit every single one of them. But when she pinches her stomach, she freezes in horror, realizing she's starting to get a little flabby from all the sweets she's been eating. Still, she quickly brushes it off, telling herself she'll burn all those calories off in battle anyway. Just then, she notices a crowd of people gathered nearby. Curious, she heads over to see what's going on. There, she finds the heir of a noble family about to have a young boy executed, all because he accidentally splashed a little mud on her designer dress. The boy is trembling in fear, begging for mercy, but the woman ignores him completely and gives her men the command to kill him. The citizens nearby murmur uneasily, clearly troubled by the scene, but none of them dare to intervene. Everyone knows this woman is the Lady of the House of Windy, a noble family so renowned that its name is respected across the entire country. To interfere would mean making a fatal mistake. Just as the boy is about to be cut down, Yui suddenly steps in and orders them to stop. The noblewoman is instantly insulted and demands if Yui even knows who she's defying. But Yui calmly replies that she doesn't care who she is. She's nothing but a cranky old hag embarrassing herself by lashing out at a child. The insult cuts deep, and in her rage, the woman orders her soldiers to attack Yui. Yui places herself in front of the boy, telling him to run away while he still has the chance, which he does. The soldiers charge forward with killing intent, but Yui summons her sword in the blink of an eye, blocks their assault, and knocks them back. The noblewoman is taken aback for a moment, but quickly shouts at her men not to lose their nerve, insisting that Yui's display was nothing more than a cheap trick. Yet, the look on Yui's face tells a different story. She is brimming with confidence. Meanwhile, Cross and Lin are out in the forest on their very first adventure mission together. They finally finally locate a red slime nest, and their job is to wipe it out. Cross figures this quest will be a good confidence boost for Lin since it's supposed to be an easy one. To start, Cross uses his storage magic to summons a bow and arrow. Lin's jaw drops in disbelief because storage magic is usually a skill reserved only for high-ranking adventurers. Cross rubs the back of his head and explains that it's the one spell he's trained the most in, so he's gotten pretty good at it. More importantly, he reminds Lin that they need to stay focused on the mission. Cross draws his bow and fires off a clean shot, hitting one of the slimes dead on. Lin is amazed, but Cross tells him not to just stand there watching. He has to try it himself. Lin nods, raises his bow, and fires several arrows, but his shots are weak, sloppy, and unsteady. Watching him struggle, Cross can't help but realize that this mission might end up being a lot longer and more exhausting than he originally thought. Meanwhile, Yui is still confidently holding her ground against the soldiers, and the noblewoman grows furious, demanding to know why her knights are struggling so much against just one girl. The crowd, however, begins to take a closer look and suddenly realizes who Yui really is, an official S-ranked adventurer. With that recognition, whispers spread among them, and many even start to believe that Yui could probably handle all 4 knights by herself with her incredible status and skill. But just then, the woman signals someone hidden in the crowd. A mage steps forward, raising his staff, and suddenly a glowing magic circle forms beneath Yui's feet. From it, enchanted chains burst upward, wrapping tightly around her. Yui gasps as her strength begins to fade. The noblewoman laughs coldly, explaining that the chains binding her are mana-draining shackles, designed to slowly sap both energy and stamina until the victim can no longer stand. Shocked, Yui realizes the woman had planted allies within the crowd, and the chains are already weakening her so badly that she can barely move. The noblewoman mocks Yui, telling her to accept her fate. At her command, the knights close in for the finishing blow. But before the knights can strike, a cloaked woman suddenly steps in front of Yui. Her voice is calm yet cutting as she scolds them for ganging up 4-on-1. The noblewoman glares at the newcomer, demanding to know who she thinks she is. She sneers that this stranger shouldn't dare to interfere now, especially when things were finally getting good. When she was about to make an example out of Yui, the cloaked woman doesn't even bother replying. In a blur of motion, she dashes forward and back so fast that most people don't even see her move. By the time she returns to her spot, the knights all collapse unconscious, the chains binding Yui shatter, and even the mage from the crowd falls to the ground defeated. Yui, having witnessed everything clearly, stares in disbelief. She admits that the woman's speed is extraordinary. In just an instant, she took down 4 trained knights and a mage with single strikes, and she didn't even look tired afterward. Yui can't help but wonder who this mysterious woman in the cloak could possibly be. However, the noblewoman is in total denial, yelling that there's no way her men could be beaten so easily. At that moment, the cloaked woman dashes right in front of her. She halts just short of striking and calmly asks her if she'd like to see her attack for herself. Realizing the fight is already lost, the woman screams in panic. When the dust settles, Yui sincerely thanks the cloaked woman for saving her life. She simply waves it off, saying it was nothing, that she just happened to interfere while she was out searching for something else. Gathering her courage, Yui asks what she can do to become as strong as her. The cloaked woman assures Yui that she's already remarkably strong for someone her age, and that there's no need to rush. What matters most is trusting the process. Still, Yui admits that lately, she's been relying too much on Lloyd, an incredible white mage who has been helping her through battle after battle. That dependence is exactly why she feels so desperate to grow stronger. The moment she hears Lloyd's name, the cloaked woman finally lifts her hood, revealing her face. With a faint smile, she tells Yui that if she's so determined to grow stronger, then they can train together. Meanwhile, Lloyd is back at the inn, spending the whole day trying to develop a new support spell. But so far his efforts have led to nothing. That's when his teammates walk in and find him in a messy, exhausted state. Worried, they ask if he's alright. Lloyd explains that he's been experimenting with ways to improve his magic, but none of his attempts have produced any real results. Hearing this, Doggett suggests that Lloyd take a break and go outside to clear his head, since he's been cooped up indoors for days. Claire quickly offers to show him around town, pointing out that he hasn't had the chance to see its beauty yet. Meanwhile, in the forest, Yui walks alongside the cloaked girl on their way to a training session. The woman introduces herself as Lilith and immediately warns Yui not to to jump at shady offers like the one she gave her before, especially since Yui doesn't even know who she really is. But Yui confidently replies that it's fine. She believes she's an excellent judge of character and can tell if someone is good or bad just by looking at them. Even so, a small part of Yui can't help but feel suspicious of Lilith, especially remembering how suspicious she looked while wearing her cloak in the town square. Still, Yui eventually brushes it off, choosing to trust her instincts that Lilith can be trusted. Putting that aside, they begin their training. Yui is surprised when Lilith casually pulls out her weapon using storage magic. Until she met Lloyd, Yui didn't even know storage magic existed, and now seeing Lilith use it only makes her realize how small her world has been up until now. Determined, she resolves to uncover the secrets of Lilith's strength for herself. Back in town, Claire takes Lloyd to a park and treats him to some delicious seafood. As they eat, Claire acknowledges that Lloyd has been pouring days into researching magic and admits it must have been exhausting. Claire wishes she could do something to help him directly. Hearing that, Lloyd takes the chance to ask her a question about her unique magic, the spell she uses to communicate with monsters. Meanwhile, in the forest, Cross is busy teaching Lin proper archery techniques. After receiving the right pointers, Lin finally manages to land his first accurate shot. Overjoyed, he celebrates excitedly, and Cross is genuinely impressed. At first, he thought Lin was just a hopeless klutz, but now he realizes Lin is actually a fast learner. With their spirits lifted, they wrap up the rest of the slimes together and decide to call it a day. Not far away, Lilith gives Yui her very first training task, to cut down an entire tree without moving from the spot where she stands. Yui blinks in confusion, wondering how such a feat could even be possible. Then, without hesitation, Lilith swings her sword, slicing clean through the massive trunk in a single strike. The tree crashes to the ground and Yui watches in shock, unable to believe what she just saw. After watching Lilith's demonstration, Yui gets excited and prepares to try it herself. Meanwhile, Claire explains to Lloyd that, just as he suspected, her power to communicate with monsters comes from inherited ancient magic. Lloyd isn't surprised. He had already guessed that only ancient magic could grant such a rare ability. Curious, he asks if there's a way for him to learn it too. But Claire tells him it's impossible, since ancient magic only appears once every few centuries, passed down to those born with it. She warns that anyone who tries to use it without inheriting it faces divine punishment. In fact, she's heard stories of people who attempted it and lost their lives instantly. She gently tells Lloyd that while she understands his curiosity, ancient magic is completely forbidden. Lloyd takes her warning seriously and agrees to leave it alone. Elsewhere, Lin and Cross finish clearing out the red slimes. It took longer than expected because of how many there were, but with the nest destroyed, they're ready to return to the Adventurer Guild for their reward. Just then, a Lunamagra appears in front of them. This a powerful, high-ranking monster. Lin panics and suggests they run, but then remembers they'll get nothing without proof of completing the quest. Cross quickly shoots an arrow at the Lunamagra, but it doesn't work. Lin urges him to try his rapid fire technique, but Cross admits he's never mastered it. Even so, Lin insists, giving him an idea of how to use his current skills to bring the monster down. Taking his advice, Cross fires multiple arrows straight at its forehead. The arrows pierce again and again until the creature's head splits open, and the monster finally falls. They return to the guild with proof of defeating both the red slimes and the Lunamagra. The other adventurers are stunned, impressed that they managed to kill such a dangerous beast. Cross then tells Lin he deserves all the credit, since it was Lin's idea that pushed him to grow stronger when he felt stuck. Lin thanks him. That's when Cross reveals his guild necklace, showing that he's actually an S-ranked adventurer. Lin quickly apologizes, embarrassed for treating someone of such high rank like a regular mentor. Meanwhile, in the forest, Yui struggles with her training. No matter how many times she tries, she can't cut down the tree. Lilith is surprised. She thought this would just be a simple warm-up. Yui is stunned that Lilith sees it as easy, which only proves how strong she must be. Even so, Yui refuses to give up. Lilith asks why she's so determined to get stronger. Yui admits that when she first became his rank, she got arrogant and thought she was unbeatable. That pride vanished when she met Lloyd, who showed her there will always be someone stronger. Now, she's desperate to improve so she can fight alongside him as an equal. Just then, a wolf drops from above, aiming for Lilith with a surprise attack. Yui reacts instantly, slashing it in midair with one strike. She rushes to Lilith, worried if she's okay. Smiling, Lilith tells her she finally managed to pull off the technique. Yui realizes it's true. Her body moved on its own when danger appeared. Still, she knows Lilith was never really in danger, considering her strength. Even so, Lilith thanks her for saving her. Moments later, the strain catches up with Yui, and she collapses. That night at the inn, Lloyd and the others grow worried because Yui hasn't returned, and it's already late. Suddenly, Lloyd senses someone outside. When they rush out, they find Yui asleep on the floor. It was Lilith who carried her back, but she slipped away before anyone saw her. The next morning, the group prepares to leave the city and continue escorting Claire back to her kingdom. Meanwhile, Lilith meets with Merlin. It's revealed that Merlin was the one who sent her to check on Lloyd, since it would have been too awkward for Merlin to face him directly after he ran away from her. As Lilith vents about how exhausting the job was, Merlin suddenly feels jealous that Lilith got to see him while she didn't. Finally, Merlin makes a decision. She'll go see Lloyd herself, because she can't stand being apart from him any longer. Meanwhile, in the Demon Kingdom, Grist kneels before the Demon Lord and apologizes for failing to destroy Ishtar. On top of that, he still has not been able to locate or capture Claire, and the Demon Lord is slowly beginning to lose his patience. The Demon Lord admits that he is honestly more disappointed than angry because he expected far more from Grist, especially since he is one of the 4 demon generals. Grist continues apologizing and promises that he will take care of everything the next time he gets the chance. The Demon Lord responds by warning him that he had better succeed next time or it will cost him his position. After leaving the throne room, Grist kicks some rubble in frustration because he has no idea how he is supposed to find Claire without any clues to follow. That is when Michelle suddenly appears and starts mocking his frustration. However, Michelle also gives him some useful information. He tells Grist that Claire is currently on her way to the royal capital and is being protected by a group of S-rank adventurers instead of knights. Grist is confused about how Michelle even knows this information and asks why he is sharing it with him in the first place. Michelle explains that he wants to get into the Demon Lord's good graces, and helping capture Claire is the perfect way to do that. Meanwhile, Lloyd and his party continue escorting Claire through a valley. As they travel, they suddenly hear rustling coming from the bushes nearby and immediately assume it might be a demon. However, it only turns out to be a rabbit. Even so, Lloyd is still not fully convinced, so he uses his enemy scan ability to check the surrounding area. He feels relieved when he confirms that there are no demons nearby. Shortly afterward, the group continues their journey and eventually decides to rest deep inside the forest. While they sit together, Lloyd talks about how quickly and confidently everyone reacted when they thought a demon was nearby. He admits that he wishes he could become that confident and strong someday so he would stop dragging the party down. However, the rest of the party immediately disagrees and tells Lloyd he needs to have more confidence in himself. They all believe that he is actually the strongest among them and say they are only trying to catch up to him. Yui explains to Lloyd that if he never acknowledges his true strength, then he will never be able to draw out his full potential. She tells him he should start giving himself more credit, and Lloyd agrees with her words. Meanwhile, Merlin arrives at the royal capital and approaches the palace gates, but the guards stop her and explain that she needs proper authorization before entering. Instead of arguing, Merlin simply uses her magic to make the guards mentally absent for a short time before calmly walking inside. She then heads toward the library and is surprised by how elaborate and detailed it is, especially since she knows it is only hiding a secret entrance at the back. Merlin reaches the hidden door and reveals it, but before she can open it herself, Lowen suddenly opens the door from the other side and invites her in. The two sit down together, and Merlin is surprised that Lowen already knew she was there. Lowen casually explains that she could smell Merlin's mana from far away. After sharing some tea together, Lowen informs Merlin that the Demon Lord's son now rules at the top of the Magocracy. Apparently, the Magocracy has remained quiet since their previous battle because the former lord's power had been overwhelming. Putting that aside, Merlin comments that the Emperor must trust Lowen greatly if she is allowed to keep her research lab inside the kingdom. Lowen tells her not to think too deeply about it because things simply ended up this way after she attempted to study and copy Merlin's magic. Now that Lowen has access to a proper research lab, Merlin pulls out one half of a grimoire and asks Lowen to examine whether it still contains the power needed to seal a demon lord. Lowen is surprised that Merlin thinks the demon lord may return, but Merlin explains that it is simply a precaution because it is better to prepare early for situations like this. Meanwhile, Lloyd and his party arrive at the forest leading toward the town of Schwurz, and from there it is only about one more day to the capital. However, the sun is already beginning to set, so they consider setting up camp. At the same time, they worry about possibly being attacked by monsters if they stay in the forest overnight. To make sure the area is safe, Lloyd uses his search magic to scan for enemies, but he is shocked when he realizes something is interfering with his spell. Moments later, a thick mist begins surrounding the group, and they quickly understand that the mist itself is blocking their mana. Lloyd studies the situation and concludes that demons must be behind this, so the group immediately decides to flee toward Schwurz since camping there is no longer safe. Meanwhile, Lowen finishes examining the grimoire and confirms that it still contains some mana, though it is only the remnants of Sybil's power. Merlin hears this and assumes it must be Sybil's final will remaining inside the grimoire. Merlin then asks Lowen if she remembers Lloyd. Lowen thinks back and remembers him as the boy who used to live deep in the mountains together with her. Merlin explains that one day Lloyd happened to touch the grimoire, and it reacted to him as well, meaning he possesses the potential to become a chosen one just like her and Sybil. Even though Merlin knew it would be extremely difficult for Lloyd to reach that level, she still believed there was a small possibility. That was why she became serious about training him and often gave him tasks far beyond his abilities. However, Merlin later realized that raising a child was far more difficult than simply teaching magic, so she never truly understood Lloyd's feelings. Because of that, Lloyd eventually ran away from home. Now Merlin has heard that Lloyd formed a party and is escorting the kidnapped princess back home, which is why she traveled all the way here to see him again. Meanwhile, Lloyd and the others are now completely surrounded by thick mist. Silica uses her wind magic to clear the fog away, and that is when they realize they are surrounded by Grist and his followers. Grist wastes no time and immediately orders his lackeys to capture Claire. Lloyd quickly responds by casting a stat boost on everyone, and the adventurers immediately draw their weapons and begin fighting. At first, the battle seems to be going well, but that changes when they try attacking Grist directly and realize that none of their attacks are hurting him at all. Grist throws a powerful punch toward them, and Daggaz barely manages to block it in time with his shield. Right after that, Yui attacks from behind, but her sword is stopped by what appears to be empty space itself. Lloyd takes one look at this phenomenon and immediately realizes it is mana armor. Grist is protecting himself with the mana surrounding his body. Grist is surprised that Lloyd was able to figure that out so quickly and assumes he must have been the person who saved Ishtar earlier. Afterward, Grist jumps high into the air and prepares another attack, but Silica hits him with a burst of fire while he is still airborne. Even that attack is not enough to defeat him. Just as the situation begins getting worse, Grist and all his followers suddenly become frozen inside massive blocks of ice. Lloyd examines the ice and realizes it is an extremely high-level ice spell. When he looks behind him, he sees that the spell came from a blue-haired beastman. Meanwhile, Michelle watches everything from a distance and realizes the situation is starting to go badly. He considers strengthening the fog, but then he suddenly turns around and sees Will standing there. Will makes it clear that he plans to stop him right there. The beastman walks toward the adventurers, and the moment Claire sees him, she immediately runs over to him. The adventurers ask who he is, and Claire introduces him as Thurian, the ice crystal hero. Lloyd assumes Thurian must be the emissary sent to rescue Claire, but Thurian says that is not the case. He explains that he is only there to protect Claire because he does not trust lowly adventurers like them. Claire scolds him for insulting the people escorting her. Just then, Grist suddenly breaks free from the ice. However, Thurian does not panic at all and confidently says he can handle this himself. He launches a series of ice attacks at Grist, but Grist either blocks or dodges every single one. The other adventurers try offering assistance, but Thurian arrogantly tells them them to stay out of his fight because he can handle it alone. Meanwhile, Michelle is shocked because Will has managed to see through all of his tricks. Michelle asks who he really is, but Will casually answers that he is just a random alchemist who came to get rid of the mist. Back at the battlefield, the adventurers continue watching Thurian fight Grist, and they are impressed by how intense the battle has become. However, Grist suddenly begins compressing his mana. Lloyd notices this immediately and tries warning Thurian, but Thurian is too arrogant to listen. Their attacks collide head-on, creating a massive explosion. When the smoke finally clears, Lloyd quickly uses his search skill and feels relieved when he confirms that all his comrades survived. However, when he searches for Claire and Thurian, he can no longer sense their mana anywhere. Grist won the clash and managed to capture Claire right on time. A nearby airship arrives, allowing Grist to escape with Claire. Thurian immediately tries using his ice magic to reach the airship, but Grist easily destroys the ice path, causing Thurian to fall straight down toward the ground. Just before he becomes a pancake, Silica quickly uses her wind magic to slow his fall and safely bring him down. Even after being saved, Thurian does not bother thanking anyone and immediately tries to head back up again. Lloyd stops him and tells him to calm down because rushing in recklessly will not help. He explains that it would be smarter for them to regroup first and think of a proper strategy. Thurian eventually agrees, though he coldly warns them not to slow him down. Meanwhile, aboard the airship, Michelle reveals to Grist that he possesses a fragment of the Demon Lord. He explains that he managed to obtain it during the battle against the previous Demon Lord. After spending several weeks researching and analyzing it, Michelle succeeded in creating a system that can draw power from its endless mana supply. His plan is to create and fully control a monster with terrifying strength using that power. Grist listens to all this in complete shock, unable to believe what he is hearing. However, their alarm suddenly begins going off. They quickly look outside and realize that the adventurers are already approaching the airship. Claire has been trapped inside a crystal prison, but she is still conscious and able to see everything happening around her. She becomes surprised when she notices that Thurian is actually cooperating with other people instead of working alone. The adventurers, together with Thurian, immediately begin attacking Grist, even though they appear to be working together properly. Grist's mana armor is simply too strong for them to break through. Grist overwhelms them with his attacks and eventually prepares to finish Thurian off, but Dagus suddenly appears at the last moment and blocks the strike using his shield. Grist attempts another attack, but suddenly his fist freezes solid and breaks apart. He is completely shocked because his mana armor should have protected him from something like that. Lloyd then explains that the damage was caused by Thurian's necrotizing spell. Lloyd reveals that Thurian secretly cast the spell earlier while Grist was distracted, which is why Grist did not feel any pain immediately. At that moment, Lloyd fully understands how Grist's mana armor works. The armor can only protect him from attacks he is capable of perceiving, which means he is vulnerable to attacks he cannot sense in time. Realizing that his weakness has been discovered, Grist immediately runs downstairs and the adventurers chase after him. As soon as Grist reaches the lower level of the ship, he rushes toward the cages containing several monsters and prepares to release them. Michelle immediately yells at him to stop because his experiments are not ready yet. Moments later, the adventurers arrive downstairs and are shocked when they see the hidden research laboratory inside the airship. Completely desperate, Grist ignores Michelle's warning and destroys the locks holding the monsters captive, setting them free. However, the moment the monsters escape, they immediately begin attacking Grist himself. Seeing this, Michelle decides it is the perfect chance to test whether he can actually control them. He pulls out a control emitter that releases heavy sound waves, and the monsters' behavior instantly changes as they calm down under its influence. Before the monsters can attack anyone else, Thurian rushes over and frees Claire from her crystal prison. Claire thanks all of them for coming to rescue her. At the same time, the adventurers notice that the monsters are preparing to attack again, so they quickly ready their weapons and prepare to fight back. Suddenly, Claire steps forward and begins using her ancient magic by singing to the monsters. Her voice manages to calm them down completely and stops them from attacking. But then, without warning, Michelle loses control of the airship and everything begins spiraling out of control. At first, first, Michelle assumes Claire's ancient magic is somehow resonating with the monsters, but he quickly realizes that is not the real problem. The fragment of the demon lord suddenly begins glowing brightly, and Michelle realizes that Claire's ancient magic is actually affecting the fragment itself and draining its source of vitality. Grist comes into contact with the fragment, and it immediately starts affecting him. His eyes slowly begin turning white as the demon lord's power spreads through him. Michelle quickly pulls the fragment away before it can explode, but he suddenly remembers that the fragment was also the source powering the entire ship. Without its energy, the airship immediately begins falling from the sky. Lloyd quickly uses gravity magic to stop everyone from being violently thrown around while the ship falls. Meanwhile, Michelle realizes that the demon lord is attempting to use Grist as a vessel. In panic, he throws the fragment directly at him, creating a massive whirlpool that begins pulling all the monsters into it. The whirlpool starts mutating and eventually transforms into a gigantic chimera with several terrifying heads. Michelle watches the transformation with genuine amazement because even he never expected such an extreme reaction to happen. Although Grist is already losing himself, a small part of his consciousness still remains. Using his claws, he suddenly slices Michelle in half because he never really liked him in the first place. The adventurers immediately attack the chimera with everything they have, but none of their attacks seem to do any real damage. To make matters worse, the airship is still rapidly falling and getting dangerously close to the ground. The group is left frozen in shock because they honestly have no idea how they are supposed to survive this situation. Meanwhile, Will meets up with Merlin and Lowen and tells them there is something extremely important they need to discuss. Will teleports Merlin directly into the forest, where she immediately uses her search magic to track down Lloyd and the others. Meanwhile, aboard the falling airship, the adventurers realize they need to escape before the ship crashes. However, the chimera is blocking their path, making escape impossible. Lloyd quickly comes up with a plan and tells everyone to press themselves against the wall. Once they do, Lloyd releases his gravity magic, causing the chimera to lose balance and topple over to the other side of the ship. This creates an opening that allows the group to safely make their way out. After reaching the outside of the ship, Thurian attempts to use his ice magic to help everyone escape, but the chimera suddenly emerges and destroys the ice with its fire breath. Even so, the short opening is enough for everyone to jump away from the ship and create some distance between themselves and the monster. As they continue falling through the air, Thurian quickly creates a large ice platform beneath them, allowing everyone to stand safely in the middle of their fall. Dagas and the others begin feeling somewhat relieved, but Lloyd warns them not to relax yet because the hardest part is still ahead of them. The final step of the plan is for Silica to use her wind magic to stop their fall at the right moment. When the timing becomes perfect, Lloyd strengthens Silica's magic with his enhancement spell. Silica then releases her wind magic, causing the group to slowly hover downward until they are close enough to safely jump and land on the ground without injury. Once they land safely, everyone praises Lloyd for both his quick thinking and his magical abilities. However, Lloyd refuses to take any credit and claims that all he did was use a few enhancement spells. Thurian then admits that he always believed teamwork was only for weak people, but after fighting alongside everyone, he now realizes that cooperating with others actually makes battles far more efficient. Not long afterward, the airship crashes into the ground behind them. Even after the massive explosion, the chimera survives and appears to have grown even stronger than before. Lloyd immediately signals for everyone to head into the forest, and they all rush into the woods before hiding inside thick bushes. Meanwhile, Merlin continues tracking Lloyd and his party with her search magic while secretly listening to their conversation from a distance. As the group hides, they hear the chimera moving through the forest nearby. They begin to suspect that the chimera is mainly targeting Claire because, even after transforming, Grist's consciousness still remains inside it. The group realizes that Grist is still aware inside the chimera's body and is specifically searching for Claire. They briefly consider using concealment magic on Claire to hide her presence, but Lloyd explains that it would only temporarily solve the problem. Even if they escape now, Grist would simply continue hunting Claire afterward. Despite the danger surrounding them, Claire remains worried about the monsters she previously calmed down before they were absorbed into the chimera. Lloyd thinks carefully for a moment before coming up with another plan. He suggests that Claire use her ancient song once again in order to send her wishes directly directly to the Demon Lord's wellspring of vitality and ask for the monsters to return to normal. Lloyd explains that if the plan works, it should free the monsters while also weakening the Chimera itself. He also mentions that he will amplify Claire's ancient magic with his own spells in order to increase the chances of success. Claire agrees to the plan, and everyone prepares to put it into action. However, just as they are about to move, Merlin suddenly appears before them. Instead of reuniting with Lloyd with a hug, she immediately starts scolding him for even thinking about using ancient magic. Lloyd is shocked to suddenly see Merlin there, but he calmly replies that he knows he is strong enough to handle it. To Merlin, his words sound dangerously overconfident, so she reminds Lloyd that she always taught him to remain humble. Lloyd responds by saying it is not overconfidence, but simply acknowledging his own power. Lloyd and Claire then rush forward to begin their plan. Thurian creates a distraction by launching several giant ice spikes at the Chimera while the monster is distracted. Lloyd climbs onto its body and drives his staff into it while Claire begins singing. As Claire sings, Lloyd starts amplifying her ancient magic. Although the plan appears to be working, the strain quickly begins taking a heavy toll on Lloyd's body. Even so, the group watches in shock as Lloyd's strategy succeeds and the monsters begin separating themselves from the Chimera one after another. Once the process is finally complete, everyone believes the battle is over. However, they suddenly look up and see a mysterious portal opening above them. Before anyone can react, Lloyd is suddenly pulled into the portal and disappears along with Grist. Lloyd wakes up inside a strange white negative space where he sees Grist's body slowly disintegrating after entering. Lloyd notices that his own body is floating strangely within the empty space and becomes confused about what is happening. That is when an unknown voice speaks to him and explains that his mind and body are currently being separated. Back in the forest, the others also hear the mysterious voice. The moment Merlin recognizes it, she immediately summons her grimoire because she realizes the voice belongs to Sybil. Inside the white space, Sybil finally appears before Lloyd and explains the terrible danger of ancient magic and the reason it was forbidden in the first place. However, Sybil admits that he himself once used ancient magic during his battle against the previous Demon Lord. Sybil explains that during the battle, everything originally went according to his plan. However, once the Demon Lord realized he was going to lose, he chose to self-destruct instead. The explosion wiped out Sybil's comrades and destroyed the entire city. Although Sybil survived, he decided to use forbidden ancient magic to bend the boundary between life and death itself. By doing so, he succeeded in bringing back both his friends and the city, but the price was his own life. After listening for a while, Lloyd notices a dark aura beginning to surround him, while his physical body slowly sinks deeper into the negative space. Confused, Lloyd asks what is happening. Sybil explains that the boundaries between life and death are beginning to close again. Apparently, Lloyd's presence inside the space is preventing the restoration from completing properly. Because of this, Sybil tells Lloyd that he must escape immediately while he still can. Lloyd asks how he is supposed to do that, and Sybil simply points toward Lloyd's chest. Lloyd touches his chest, and suddenly his body begins escaping from the negative space. Outside, everyone notices that the portal is beginning to close, so they desperately shout for Lloyd to hurry. Thankfully, Lloyd manages to escape just in time and reappears behind them. The moment everyone sees him alive, they immediately rush over and hug him in relief. Merlin quietly holds her grimoire while tears form in her eyes, and she thanks Sybil for allowing Lloyd to return safely. The next day, the group finally arrives at the royal capital. The girls are genuinely shocked to discover that Lloyd's master was actually the great sage Merlin all along. Shortly afterward, Claire arrives and thanks everyone again for safely escorting her back to the capital. The king has also requested to meet with the adventurers, so they wait together until they are called in. Around that time, Thurian approaches Claire and sadly admits that he lost the special bag she made for him when they were children. Claire does not become upset and simply smiles while promising to make him a new one someday. At the end of the day, the adventurers finally return home after receiving praise from the king for safely bringing Claire back despite everything that happened. The king even rewards them with a mansion so they can continue working near the capital whenever they wish. Just then, Lowen suddenly appears and begins sniffing everyone around her. She notices that Lloyd's scent of mana feels somewhat similar to Merlin's. Merlin walks up behind them and explains that Lowen is able to distinguish people through their scent. Since Merlin is viewed as a role model by many adventurers, they immediately begin praising her and talking about how amazing she is. After things finally calm down, Merlin asks Lloyd if he plans on returning home with her. Lloyd refuses because he wants to continue adventuring. He also explains that the king requested for them to remain in the kingdom for a while, and because of that, he wants to study all kinds of magic instead of focusing only on support magic. Merlin does not object to his decision at all. In fact, she honestly seems proud of how far Lloyd has come. This was the end. Subscribe to not miss more recaps and watch the next video on screen.